Hello? Okay, there we go. Jeez. Hey, y'all. Let's turn this screen off. Look at this. Whoa. Badass. What's up, Turbo Time? Yeah, those were some good songs, huh? That was, what's this called? Windows 96 Enchanted Instrumentals and Whispers. Pretty swaggy. Bam, bam, bam. Dude, I got a long list here of things to talk about, and I don't even think I'm gonna get the whole story, so let's turn it down. But before we get into it, been having a good time. I just got done swimming. I did 36 laps, which is pretty damn cool. And but it's got me feeling good, and I feel like I want to talk a bunch before I do Dead Space, so I'll be nice and worn out by the time the stream starts. Which I plan to do at 5, so this could take about an hour or so. And then I'm gonna take a break and start up again at 5. And assuming that all works out, I'm excited we get to play that. So I'm just gonna get into it. This will be uploaded to YouTube. So just keep that in mind. And let's just check this out real quick. I wonder what this is about. Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of a mystery, huh? So, okay. So this is gonna be, yeah, like I said, it's gonna be uploaded to YouTube, so the whole thing will be there. I think this is gonna be part one of two. I'm kind of splitting it between the two jobs I had. And this, as the title says, is about my story in Yosemite. So I spent, if you knew me, if you knew me back then a year ago, you knew that I just randomly decided to go to the forest for about 6 months and just lived up there. And there's a lot of stuff, and a lot of people have asked me, or some people haven't asked me, and I'm sure they want to know. So I'm going to put it here, and hopefully, if anyone's interested, they can listen and kind of hear about what it was about and what I did there, and if it was cool or not, or if I liked it, because I kind of just came back and then I got back into the swing of things. And some people I got to tell, but like some of you guys, I didn't get to see one on one and really talk about it in length. So I'm just going to get going. I'm going to try to keep it coherent. Definitely feel free to chat, and if I have a second, I'll answer the questions. It's not like I have a long book written here, and you're not going to throw me off. But I just don't want to lose what I'm talking about. So don't worry, just proceed as normal. Ha ha ha. So I got it all written down, and the first thing I wanted to start talking about is how I even learned about the job in Yosemite. So no, the biggest advantage of this thing and disadvantage of this job is not many people knew it existed. It's like kind of on the down low, and you think they would have better advertising, like, "Hey, come work in this beautiful national park that people pay hundreds or thousands of dollars to stay at and drive to, and you can live here," and it's like all this wonderful stuff, and nobody knows that there's like very few amount of people that actually know you could do that. Because I mean, most people just assume it's like some kind of insider thing, and you can't just show up and apply or whatever. So this all started last year in about, I would say, actually, it was 2 years ago because it was before New Year's. So this was 2021 in about November. I was working at this chicken wing place here in town, and it was not the best job, but it was my first job after COVID where I was actually out and about. We still had to all wear masks, which is just hell in the kitchen. Like you're out of breath all the time, pushing, food around and going fast. And I was getting back in shape because of I was just sitting around all day during the lockdown, but I was at this chicken wing place, and so, my job was basically to fry up the food as fast as possible, fulfill the tickets, sauce the wings up, put them on a plate, and ring the bell. And that's what I did every day for like part-time hours. I wanted full-time, but that's a whole other story. But it was okay. It's just that there were a lot of parts of the job I didn't like. Like you had to clean the bathrooms, and every night we'd go out and bring trash out to the dumpster. But that's just what you have to do with a restaurant. So it's a hard job. So definitely, if you've never been in the restaurant industry, just stay out. It's hard. So, anyways, while I was there, I made some friends, mostly with the other cooks. There were some cool people there. We would hang out, and like after work, right down the way, there was this liquor store, probably one of the most dangerous liquor stores in Stockton. But we would go there after work and grab like a tall guy or tall boy of beer. So I'd probably get like the Heineken or the Sapporo or whatever hipster shit I was on. So I was out there, and one of the waiters who I was pretty cool with, his name was Cameron. And I'm gonna be certain people I'll say their names, certain people I won't. Like if I have bad things to say about people, I'm not gonna say their names. And if you guys want to know and you know me and you want to ask me in real life, I can tell you. But as far as me putting this on the air, if I have nothing bad to say about people, I won't try to use their name. But anyways, um, so Cameron was a waiter that worked there, and he seemed like a really chill dude. He just showed up and worked a bunch, didn't care. Had a nice car for his age. Had like a big backpack he took around everywhere. So the backpack was like, oh, that's new. You don't usually see people bringing like a big like nature backpack. That's what it was, like an REI red and like strappy backpack with like a water bottle on it and stuff. It's like, oh, that's cool. So that caught my attention as I'm cooking. I got nothing else to look at. And so one day I was just talking to him out in the parking lot, like I said, with our tall boys of beer. And I was like, oh, like, he would talk about, or he talked to me at work actually for the first time about it. He's like, oh, yeah, my old job, I only worked usually like minimum wage, but the tips were crazy. So, or they, he told me stories about how he had trouble getting paid. So his coworkers helped him out. And I was like, that's cool. Where was that? And he's like, oh, it was this national park job in Yosemite. And I was like, huh? And it catches your interest. And he's like, yeah, I worked my way up from a busboy to a dishwasher to eventually a bartender. And lo and behold, I was making like $200 a day in tips, and I could just live there for next to no money per week. I was like, holy shit, that sounds great. So all I heard was this guy was making $200 a day, and he was paying what he told me was $10 a week for rent, and that's pretty much true, the rent part. But for some reason, I thought I'd just instantly be making tips, so I was just going to rake in the money. But not exactly, but I was super interested in that. I didn't act on it immediately, but I was like, wow, that's really cool. I should think about that. So I spent my tenure at Smitty's for a little while left, the chicken wing place, and probably for another month or so. And then one day I just was like, this job isn't for me. And I was still on my probation, so I just got up and left. Which, don't do that. That's the last time I'm ever going to do that. But, legally I'm allowed to, but it's just like super unethical unless they're like dicks to you. And those people, the owners were nice. So it's just that one day one of the people snapped at me or something. I was like, I'm done with this, and I'm sick of the trash and blah blah blah. And I was still kind of messed up in the head from lockdown, very like me centered. So I just dipped out, and like that was my last day. And then I thought about what Cameron had told me. So then I went on to do a UPS job for a month. That was great, but basically after that, I went into the website that he told me about. So the company that owns Yosemite, or at least they own the bid for the park, which means they are able to provide the jobs there because it's kind of a public zone. So the way the jobs work is pretty interesting. We'll get into that. But the company's name is Aramark, which is like A-R-A Mark, M-A-R-K. And they are a linen and clothing and rug company, but they employ a lot of restaurant employees. So they do both. But they're not a very big company, so the idea of them taking on basically a national park size work area was pretty interesting because they're not that kind of company. They're not like some one of those titans of industry, like God forbid Amazon. Ooh, that'd be rough. But anyways, so the company's name is Aramark. So I went on the website, I looked at the jobs, and I saw some postings that I actually really liked. So like one of the big ones was horse tour guide. So I love horseback riding. A couple of years back, I was really into it. I've probably ridden a horse like hundreds of times. And I was like, wow, that sounds super fun. And that's something I actually know how to do. It's not a common skill. So I'd love to apply for that. So there was the horse tour guide. And the other one was the corral boss, which I don't know what that was. It was very vague. And then there was a stable hand. So I think I applied for all three. And that's what I sent in. And then another one I sent in was the this was a funny story I just remembered. I sent in an application, so I sent in two, right? So one of them was the baker's assistant at the Awani, which is a very nice hotel, very old in Yosemite, been there forever. Prestigious, right? I think prestigious. And I think they even filmed, well, they based some of the parts of The Shining off of the Awani. So the inside of the Awani actually looks like some of the Shining Hotel, which was very trippy because I noticed that the first time I went in. But anyways, I applied for baker's assistant, and then for some reason, I don't know why, I applied for baker, which was just baker. And I didn't know what it actually meant was head baker, like you're the baker. I was like, oh, just be a baker or a baker's assistant, like whatever. I'll go for both. Always aim high. And one day I'm going and I'm driving to the chicken wing place because I had done this way earlier in the winter. I applied or whatever. And the lady calls me who is like the head chef of the Awani. And she's, trying to interview me on the phone. And the first time I call her, I'm like, oh, I'm about to go to work. Can I call you back? And she gets really pissed off. I'm like, well, I can't do anything. I'm about to go to work. So a bad time to call. She's like, yeah, fine. And then a couple days later, I totally forget. And I'm driving and I'm doing some urgent errand I have to do. I have to go grab something for somebody and bring it back like really fast. And then she calls me again right as I'm pulling up to the place I have to go get the thing at. So she calls me again, and then again I tell her off. I'm like, oh, actually, I'm really busy and I have this important errand. And she's like, really? And I'm like, yeah. She's like, oh my god, and she hangs up. And then finally, I think I call her at my house like that night or something, and I'm doing the phone interview, and she's like, okay, this is for. I didn't know what position it was for because remember I applied for two different ones, so I'm talking to her on the phone, and I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, like what's this about? And she's like, oh, well, we want you to work here. Like we like your application. It seems like you have some kitchen experience, but she's like, I want to know what's like your baking experience. Like, how experienced are you with baking? I was like, oh, I like to like bake at home. I bake stuff and took home economics in high school. My mom taught me lots of baking stuff. Like I'm trying to be modest, but say that I know more than the average bear, right? And I'm not bragging, but I'm trying to purport that I know a little bit more. And then she's like, huh. And she's like, do you know how to make a puff pastry? Which is like this technique of spacing out air between pastry to give it like room to fill it in with. And I don't know how to do that. So I was like, oh, not really. No. She's like, huh. It's like, look, what I'm hearing here is you have pretty basic baking knowledge. And then she hits me with the bomb. She's like, we kind of want the head baker of the Awani to have a little bit more baking experience than just home economics and high school and this and that. I'm like, oh my God. I was like, oh geez, I thought you were interviewing me for the baking assistant. So this whole time she thinks that I'm some idiot that called in and wants to be the head baker of this esteemed place. And she is forced to interview me. And I'm like, yeah, I baked in high school. I know how to do this. I'm like, no, I don't know what a puff pastry is, but like, I'm going to get hired, right? And she's like, oh my God. So she was not very happy. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And I was like, anyways, can you like hold my application? Cause I kind of want to come there in the spring. I'm already still asking her for stuff. Like I deserve it. Like I'd actually contributed anything besides show that I'm super underqualified. I'm like, can you hold my application? Cause I want to come by in the spring. She's like, well, why don't you just call in February and then you could come by in spring. I was like, oh, okay. So fast forward, I did my UPS job. It's February. I look at the website. I see those two jobs, right? Stable hand, three jobs: stable hand, corral boss, tour guide. So I put those in. I think not even a week later, I get a call from the general manager of the Valley, whose name I'm not going to say. He's high up. But this guy basically runs all the operations of the most popular area of the park, which is the Valley that everybody goes to. It's flat. There's like 3 hotels there, a bunch of places to eat. That's where all the workers live that work there. So he gives me the lowdown. He says, look, we're really interested in having you for any of those horse jobs you applied for, but we're super understaffed. He's like, would you like to come here maybe a week or a month early to come in like late March? And then you can work until late April when the stables open up. That's what I was sold. So come in March, move on to the real job in late April, right? Just a month. So that's how I'm thinking of it in my head. Okay, just a month of a job I didn't ask for. And then I said, well, okay, yeah, why don't I get up there? Because I don't have plans to do anything at home for the month of. So I'm like, okay, sure. And then I'm like, well, what jobs do you want me to come do early? Because apparently they're super understaffed and they need the help. That's what he told me. So I'm like, okay, what can I help out with? And he says, okay, so here's the list of jobs. There's housekeeping, which to me at first sounded like a nightmare, like, changing towels every day, cleaning this and that. I'm like, ooh. We have housekeeping, we have maintenance jobs, we have custodial jobs, we have customer service / retail jobs. So far, none of these sound good to me. I'm like, ooh, I'm not good enough to be a mechanic. That's what I thought. I don't want to do housekeeping. I know retail's a nightmare. And custodial just sounds filthy. And he's like, the last one is kitchen jobs. And so there's that old saying, it's better the devil you know than the devil you don't, right? So I just got done doing 2 or 3 kitchen jobs in previous time, and I didn't like it. I thought to myself before I applied for this job, I never want to do kitchen stuff again. But here I am looking at it, and I'm like, I probably should pick that because I actually know what I'm doing, and I'm not going to get stressed. So I'll pick the kitchen job. So that's going to set me up for something later that we're going to talk about. But that's what I went in with. I told him I'll do the kitchen job, and he said, okay. So I got it because it's really easy to get. That's what nobody tells you. These are like entry level jobs. He's like, they are minimum wage. And I was like, oh, and he's like, but keep in mind, this is how they sell you. Keep in mind, you are paying next to nothing for rent. So it is a good way to save money. I'm like, okay, whatever. I'm doing it for the experience, right? I'm thinking it's going to be some easy job. I'm going to cook hot dogs for tourists or whatever. It's going to be fun, like a summer job, right? Huh. We'll get to that. So we organized for me to come up in late March. So I drive up the last day of March because all that month it was snowing in Yosemite. I didn't want to drive up in the snow. So I waited till it's thawed out. And like the 31st of March is the first day I get there into the park. So my parents came with me, bless their souls, to help me move in. And I go see what I'm actually going to live in. So I just lied to you. Sorry. So I actually did a little reconnaissance mission with my dad. Me and him went up there a week before I was going to move, and we looked around in all the areas to see what kind of living conditions it was, to see if I actually wanted to do this. So we go to the park, we drive in. There's like nobody there because it's like middle of March. It's super cold. No one goes there when it's snowing. And I'm looking around, and we park near this place where it looks like there's lots of tents, and that's kind of how they described my living situation to me. So I'm like, that might be it. So here I go, we park, and I go sneak through the woods around the back side, and I walk into this area of all these little tents, and I'm like, oh, this is kind of cute. They're bigger than I thought. They're like 15 feet by 15 feet. Pretty spacious, and the bottom is a hardwood floor, foundation built in, and then heavy canvas on top. So it's like a tent cabin, they call it. And so what I do is I take my phone, I lift one of the outer flaps for ventilation, and I stick my phone with the camera on toward the inside of the tent. I start taking pictures, a little video. It's because you can't peek in. The door's locked. There's no way to look in. So that's the only way I could figure out what was in. So I had like a little stereo or a little submarine telescope coming out of the water, but I was doing that in the tent. I look at the pictures, and it's pretty spacious. There's like a cabinet, a bed, this and that. So pretty cool, right? So I look at that. That's my reconnaissance. I decide I want to do it. So fast forward a week later. It's the 31st of March. We're moving in, and it's the same tent area that I went to. So I was like, oh, cool. So we get there, and the layout of this area to kind of set the stage, this was called the Huff tent area. It's like the place for the very new people who are just showing up, and that's me. So you get to the parking lot for all the residents with cars. Let's say only 20% of the people who came have a car. The rest people just walk or bike or skateboard or whatever, take the shuttle. But I brought my car, so we park in the employee area. I signed in. They gave me a key. They showed me the layout. So there's the parking lot, and there's this large community building. When I say large, it's probably 100 feet long, 20 feet wide. It's like a wide looking, like portable building. And there's a few rooms in it. So there's the community kitchen, which is not very big. It's probably 20 feet by 15 feet. Think of the size of like a kitchen in a dormitory or something, like, I don't know, an office kitchen. Yeah. So that's there. There's only one fridge. And so at first it's not a big deal because there's not many people living there. The parking lot was like dead empty. And there's the kitchen. Next to that are the bathrooms, which I actually checked out. They were really nice. There was like individual bathrooms. You had to use a code to get in, so not anybody could go use it. And then the last one was a laundry room. So that's pretty cool. And then you look out past that building, and there's like rows and rows of tents. There's got to be like 100 or 200 tents just sprawled out in like these twisting patterns. They're not all grid-like, because grid-like is creepy. One of the places is grid-like, like one of the neighborhoods. It's like a grid of tents. That shit's creepy. I do not like it. It reminds me of history class. Like, anyways. So I'm actually lucky because I am like the first tent in the far left corner from the community center build, or not the community center, but the kitchen building, right? So I'm extremely close to the bathrooms, the kitchen. I got to walk like 5 feet. I'm thinking, okay, if I ever have to go to the bathroom, I'll just walk 5 feet and go into this, empty bathroom. And next to the kitchen, there was like more bathrooms, like the public ones. Well, you still needed a gate code, but those had showers and bathrooms. They were really nice for like public stuff. Probably some of the best public ones I've seen. I say public, I mean like outdoor, all that crap. So pretty interesting layout. And the next thing I noticed is as I'm moving in, there's a guy next to his truck. He's just got this big white pickup truck, and the back's open. He's sitting on the back. He's like smoking a cigarette. There's just a bunch of crap in the back of it. It seems like he just showed up too. So I went and said hi to him. He has like a cowboy hat, long hair. So I've been debating if I should say this person's name because they're going to be a big part of the story, but we'll call them Traveler because that was their nickname. Everybody who's bounced from park to park gets these nicknames. So he's come from a lot of different parks. So his name is Traveler. So I met him, and then I told him what tent I was going to be in, which is number 50. 52 or 56. One of those numbers was my tent. So if you ever go over there, you can come look at the tent. I'm not there anymore. But he's like, oh, that's cool. That's my tent. So he didn't even know he's going to get a roommate. So I was like, oh, crap. I was like, well, can I move in? He's like, sure. So he goes in there. He clears some stuff off the bed because I think he was using mine for extra storage, whatever. And then I get to meet him. I mean, I talk to Traveler and this and that. He tells me kind of his story, how he bounced from, he's from Florida and he's gone through every national park pretty much from Florida to here. So he just came from one in Utah that I can't remember the name of, and then Death Valley, and then up to here. So pretty interesting. And I got to know him, and he was my roommate. So we kind of did everything together because he moved in like the week before me, or maybe a few days before. And the thing was, is he wasn't able to get his work orders or his documents to work for like a week because he couldn't do a background check or he didn't have an ID. But they rushed it through because they needed people. So he managed to get one without an ID. I was like, huh. So I met him and I moved into the tent and it was pretty snug, but I got used to it. Like I wasn't, a lot of people can't get over the tents, but I definitely was like, whatever, it'll be comfy. I'm only going to come in here when I'm super tired or I'm up in the morning. I'm not going to hang out here a lot. I'm here for the outdoors, right? So, and then to give you like a idea of the positioning of the camp that we lived at, there's the big valley shopping area where all the shops and restaurants and tourist stuff is. And then down the way, like down the road, like half a mile, hidden behind trees, there's this big, complex of tents. And right above the tents on the horizon, there's this giant mountain that's like a mesa that goes up and it plateaus. And up there is the upper valley. They called it like the highlands. And so it was really hard to get up there. You couldn't get there from the tents. It was like 2 miles up, basically. It was huge, just right there. So you could look up there and, very beautiful to look at, just amazing. Because you're in this normal looking place, but you look around and it's this a beautiful cradle of just nature and mountains and trees. And the air was super crisp and just smelled good. And you just felt vivified. I don't know the word for full of life. But very cool place. I settled in pretty easily. The first night I was like, well, I want to put my best foot forward and make some friends. I don't want, because a lot of people, what happens is, this used to happen to me, is like, you get somewhere new and you kind of just are too shy to talk to anybody and you don't meet anybody and you're kind of waiting for someone to talk to you. So I just learned over time from new situation after new situation, just be the first guy to start talking to people. Because it seemed like the neighbors I had, keep in mind, there were only 4 people that were moving into that area. I was brand new. I was one of the first batch. So it was me, my roommate Traveler, and 2 other guys that were cool. So one of the cool guys on the Crossway, his name was Zach. The other guy's name was Roger. So they were super friendly, and we all kind of met up, and we're like, well, it's just us. Like, let's go hang out and do something. So we go walk around and figure out the geography of the place. We're talking. It's getting dark. It's probably 4 or 5. I just said bye to my parents, so I'm just on my own. Whatever. I was 23 or 24. I didn't give a shit. So I was like, okay. And walking around, getting used to the place. We go to the big Awani Hotel. We hang out, look around, explore it all, go up and down the stairs. We realize that all the food there is way too expensive because everything's tourist prices, and our discount doesn't really help. Because the dinner buffet alone is like $90. With the employee discount, it's like 75. So no. We end up walking around. Then we look around like the little exhibit they have. It's pretty cool, but it's just a beautiful hotel. Not much to do in there for like 4 dudes that are like 20s. They're like, whatever. We're not going to sit around and buy expensive drinks or smoke cigars or whatever. So we end up turning around trying to get back. And the guy leading us, Roger, is like, oh, I know the way back. I biked here my first few days. So we're going and I'm getting a bad feeling like, what's going on? Like, this is not the right way. I don't remember this at all. And Trey, if you're here, it's kind of like when our one friend likes to lead the walking and that he doesn't know where he's going and we all kind of just follow him. And I've learned to be savvy to that and not let it happen. But there's been times like we were in Santa Cruz where it didn't go so well. We ended up walking the wrong way for about 30 minutes. And then we're like, where the fuck are we going? So anyways, that started to happen. I was getting that feeling. I'm like, I don't know if this is the right way, Roger. Like, I don't remember this way. He's like, no, this is the shortcut. We go this way. And so it's getting really dark. And I'm like, I'm going to pull my phone out and see if I can get my map app going. So I get the map app and we are the complete wrong way. So I show him and I'm like, we need to cut through here because we're going the complete opposite direction. He's like, oh, okay. He's like, whatever. I'm like, dude. So over time, you kind of start to learn who's reliable, who's not with these certain things. So I was like, okay, probably not going to let Roger tell me which way anything is from now on because I don't want to get lost. And you're in the forest, so if you get too lost, like and it's dark, you could be screwed. So there's not just like a cell phone you can go to or whatever. So we end up wandering a little bit, we get a little lost, and then we go back to after we turn around, we walk through like some street, like some roads and some dark nature and stuff. And at that point, I was pretty oblivious to the wildlife there, so I didn't really know like if there was anything dangerous or anything. So I'm just like, okay, I'm just kind of walking, not scared or anything, but I was like, huh, I wonder what's out here. So we made it back, and I was super tired after my first day. I just collapsed, went to sleep fine. I think I chatted up Traveler a bit, and so that was the first night. And so after about, I had less than a free day. I think I just had the next day was orientation. I showed up on a Tuesday, and orientation was on a Wednesday. So hella early in the morning, they made us get up and go to orientation at like 8 a.m., which doesn't sound super early. People are going to be like, I get up at 6 a.m. every day. Whatever, man. I just traveled up somewhere and we're at super high altitude, like a mile up, so you get more tired. So I wanted to sleep, but I had to wake up super early and go to orientation. They had us go through like what was basically like a college lecture, like a 4 hour class with a break included in the middle about everything you could think of for your job. Super strenuous, just like I'm like dying. I just need coffee or something. I'm like, this sucks. So I kind of noticed that after the orientation, they told me I was going to meet my boss and I should stick around to meet them. And here I am, Mr. Best Foot Forward. I'm like, oh, I should meet my boss, like get a good impression going so things go smoothly, right? Even though I'm in the back of my head, I'm only going to be doing this job for a month. So, like, whatever, you know, I could just try my best and leave and they'll be happy they had me, right? So, of course, I stick around and it doesn't go as I expected because the boss does show up, or at least one person shows up with somebody else. They aren't the actual bosses, they're just like the side guys, and they see me and my roommate who are both doing the same job. We're called junior cooks or something, which I hate that job title. What are we, 10? And these guys see us like, oh, you're the junior cooks? And we're like, yeah. He's like, okay, cool. Yeah, we actually need you to come in tonight in like 5 hours. And I'm like, huh? So they're like, okay, why don't you go to uniform, get your uniform, and then come in immediately. I'm like, dude. So straight from orientation, we get scooped up. I still haven't had like a free day to explore or do anything. And then they said, we'll have your schedule for you later. So I go to work that night after I go to uniforms, get my chef, garb or whatever, and or cook garb. I can't say I'm a chef. I didn't earn that. And I go there, and they already have me on the schedule. And starting that day, I'm working 5 days in a row. So I'm like, oh my god, no breaks. So it was a long week. So the kitchen job itself was pretty interesting because I've done some kitchen jobs. This was definitely the biggest kitchen I've been in. But it was interesting because I get there and they show me the head chef himself, who I'm going to call him Chef C. Can you tell who the villains of the story are going to be based on who's being called what? I hope not. But Chef C, he says, what's up? And he says, you're the new guys, right? And it's me and my roommate Traveler. And we're in the kitchen and he gives us a 30-minute tour. Here's this, here's this, here's this. I try to remember everything. I kind of know what stuff does already. And then he says, okay, now go to work and just ask your coworkers what you need to do. And that's pretty much the status quo, where I get to work and I didn't get any instructions about what I'm doing, what my job is. I'm like, what do I do? So the coworkers tell me, well, you're the new guys, so you're basically doing the grunt work, which is preparing pre-made meals pretty much most of your shift. And oh my God. So first of all, shout out to the coworkers, my other cooks, because they were one of the best reasons I stayed there. If I didn't have nice coworkers, I probably would have left, and that their story would have ended here. Because the work taught me a lot. It wasn't the work itself, but it was the environment and the way people acted. So one funny story is they don't know what to do with me because I'm new and I'm a go-getter and I've done kitchen jobs. I know what I'm doing. I can work fast. I want to get things done. But it seemed like they kind of just wanted, the chefs wanted to just shelf me and they didn't know what to do with me. So it's like the longer I take, they don't care. As long as I'm busy, I'm not bugging them, right? I don't thrive in work environments like that. I want to help and do things. So I get done with my prepping, which is like egg salad or eggs and eggs and eggs and eggs. And like, they're like, oh, you're done with that? Okay, great. So they said, you're going to be marinating chicken. And I'm like, okay, what does that entail? And it's disgusting. So they're like, go into the freezer or the walk-in fridge, I guess, grab the big boxes of chicken, which are these entire rotisserie chickens raw. You're going to take them with gloves. You're going to pour in a giant tub. You're going to create a giant tub of Dijon and honey mustard mix. It's like you stick your arm in, it goes up to your elbow, giant tub, right? You're going to take these raw chickens with your gloves and you're going to dip your entire arm into the tub and rub them with mustard and then stick them on a tray and then slice the, I don't know, elbows or knees so the legs come out all the way, tie them down, prepare them and spread them out so they can bake evenly and just do that. So that takes me hours because it's like we need 240 chickens, right? Which is like 12 trays or no, not even. It's like 24 trays, even more, maybe 30 because it's like 8 per tray. So I'm just doing this all day. It smells like gross raw chicken and mustard. And nobody likes that job. That's why it's given to me, right? So people tell me, well, you had to do it one day. They usually don't make you do it 2 days in a row, right? No, because remember I had that 5 day week. Every day I'm coming in, they're like, you do the chicken, you do the chicken, you do the chicken. Every day I'm getting Dijon over my arms. I have to go home and shower and rub the Dijon off my arms after work every day, like little bits of brown mustard. It's so gross. So I hate it. And it's so disgusting. And it's like only the coworkers are sympathetic. The chef's like, whatever. And he's really awkward and distant to talk to. So it's like, what's going on with this job? Is this really what I'm going to do every day? So not super fun, really long hours. It was not very low key or relaxed environment. It seemed pretty rushed, especially during dinner. Like no one knew what they were doing. It seemed like we didn't have enough people, and the dishes themselves are pretty gross. I actually went and got one of the chickens, and mind you, I don't cook the chicken. So one of my first days after my shift, I want to go get dinner because, by the way, they don't give you meals for free. That's a big thing. This company, the first thing I noticed, you're screwed for food. There's no food unless you're lucky like me and you work in the kitchen. You might be able to siphon some, but I was taught to not do that at my other job, so I wasn't stealing food or trying to bag up my own lunch from within and just keep it. I'm sure some people did that, but that was kind of faux pas, like taboo. We don't talk about it, but that's what was happening. Is there was no provided meals. You don't even get a free meal. You get a discounted meal, so you can buy an employee meal for half off or something. It's still $15 because it's tourist prices, right? 50% off is like normal price. People come here with no money and they're screwed. So like me, I brought cans and beans and like tuna and this and that. So I had some food to eat like that. But this night I wanted to go get an employee meal. I get the chicken and the mashed potatoes and it comes with zucchini. I hate zucchini. And the chicken is literally pink. So I look into it and it's pink. It's like not cooked. It's like medium rare chicken. I'm like, what the hell? So I don't eat it all and I don't know who to tell. But I think I went into the Discord that day and I was like telling you guys like, hey, can you guys help me? Like, can you put reviews that say the chicken's pink? I don't think anyone did it, but I was pretty concerned that we're serving pink chicken because like people go there, they don't know that they're gonna get sick. So I'm like, oh my god, and that was pretty gross. And as life went on in the kitchen, as the weeks rolled by, I kind of noticed that a lot of the workers there were just like, oh, I would tell them like, what's up with this? Like something like, oh, this happens. Like we never get this or this never seems to get done. And everybody's response that had been there for a long time is, oh, you get used to it. You get used to it. You get used to it. So it takes a certain kind of person to just roll their eyes and say you get used to it. And it turns out that this sort of job and this sort of environment was a breeding ground for people with that kind of personality. They just say you get used to it. It means I don't care. I got over it. I don't ask those kinds of questions anymore. I have no ambition to change things. So those were all the coworkers of mine. So you can imagine how different the power balance was with management and the workers, and we'll get into that later because it was very interesting. So furthermore, that's pretty much the general idea of the beginning part of the kitchen. We're going to get back into it and more interesting stuff happens, but my general day-to-day was at first like prepping, getting things together, eggs, chicken, helping people out, doing this and that, chopping onions, blah blah blah. Didn't really have a good relationship with the head chef, Chef C, but there was other chefs like Chef J, who was cool. He showed up out of nowhere, and at first I was skeptical, but then he kind of made things run well, and it was just on days when it was just me and him, we did pretty well. Like there was one day that was a good bonding moment where everybody else either called out or got injured. Somebody sliced their hand open that day, so they left, and the person that helped them left. So it was literally just me and Chef J left. He's like second in command, pretty much. And there was like 3 hours of dinner left from like 6 to 9, and we just killed it. I was in the one branch of the kitchen, he was in the other branch. It was just me and him, and we basically made that thing run like all night. Just two guys. It was impossible because it's a giant kitchen. It's like a buffet. We get hundreds of people a day, so it was crazy. We managed to make it work. We ran back and forth. I was just like going crazy the whole time. Pretty cool. One of my highlights of my cooking career. Another one coming up, but I liked that day. And then we grabbed two, what are they called? Topo Chicos, the little sparklings. We drank them. And the other chef that I didn't know very well, he seemed kind of odd. His name's Chef Z. We'll talk about him later. But he just pulled up at the end with his truck after the shift, and we all hung out in the loading bay where the trucks come in and drank there. And he was like, "You didn't get me one?" And I was like, "Well, shift workers only. Like, you weren't here today, so basically, no, you don't get a Topo Chico. What did you do?" So I don't know. But that was a good day. So I thought me and him were pretty cool, me and Chef Jay. So he was all right. He seemed like the nice one to work with. He understood it's about the work. It's not about this petty bullshit of blah blah blah, like the Chef C was, pushing. So that's that for the kitchen. So let's get back to some fun stuff. So we're going to talk more about the social life aspect because work is work, right? Whatever. I didn't come there to work, but it seemed like this job was going to be a bit more intense than I realized. And keep in mind, I'm getting minimum wage, and this is a job where I could cut my finger off, burn myself. I was hitting my head on the top of the hoods, the oven hoods, every day because it's like 6 feet tall are the oven hoods, and I'm a little over 6 feet, so I bumped my head every day. It sucked. So I just didn't go there, and they didn't put me there because it was just like, damn, like in Frankenstein's monster keeps bumping his head. So anyways, as far as the social life goes, the best thing was the nature part of it. Like, you're in Yosemite, it's nature, it's beautiful. So there was like, the first thing you'll notice is there's no technology really. You have a phone, you get less than 1 bar, there's no 5G, there's no nothing. I sound like an old guy. Back in my day, we didn't have no 5G, we didn't have Wi-Fi. So there's nothing really. You get enough bars to, at night I would lay down and I would open my phone and open up a YouTube video, and I would let it buffer for like a minute, and it could load up like a 360p video that I could watch for 20 minutes without a lot of interruptions. That's about the level it is. I like to watch YouTube before bed, so I could do that, but that's about it. You can call people, and some people have good reception and they'll get your call. Some people won't. You can text. That's about it. So there was the community, or the gym. I think it's the rec center they called it. So the rec center had some Wi-Fi, but I didn't know that for like a month. I wasn't really using my phone that much. It was great. So I got really used to just no technology. I took a lot of pictures with my phone. I listened to music that I downloaded, and that's about it. It's like on the way to work and stuff. And I would just hang out in nature on my days off. I think my first days off, I went off and explored. I tried to meet up with some friends and try to like work, or not work, hike, do things like that. So that was super fun. And just living in the nature and making friends, and everybody's there together. But in the first few weeks, there weren't a lot of people, so it was just mostly me, Traveler, Roger, and Zach. So we would hang out and get into trouble. They would stay up super late, and they would hang out with the people who had been there already that are in the different areas, like the long-term people that have been there for years, or returning people that have tenure, because that's how it kind of works. Your seniority, you roll over. Every 6 months, if you come back, you can keep your seniority and you get better housing, yada yada. So those long timers were there, and they would come into ours, swoop down into our kitchen because nobody was using it. There's like an extra kitchen for them. And then as more Huff people showed up, that's what my tent area was called, Huff. They'd say, "Oh, you're in Huff? Huff, Huff, Huff." I thought it was short for Hufflepuff, like it was some Harry Potter shit, but it was just Huff. It wasn't that. So they would show up, and we would kind of meet with them, and I weren't sure who they were. I thought they were like people that were new too, but they acted kind of weird and cliquey, the old timers. So I didn't really get along with many of them. But Traveler, Zach, and Roger would stay up super late, especially Zach and Traveler, like to 4 a.m. I would try to get to bed at least by midnight or 1 every night. I'd have some fun, get to bed, go to work, because it was just mostly felt like I was there to just work. So that was mostly the nightly routine. You'd get home and hang out. And like I said, the camp had a beautiful view of the mountain. It was like anywhere you went, it was just super scenic. One of the I'll talk about that later. The next chapter is called More Friends. So that's when more people show up. But in the beginning part, for the like first 2 weeks, hanging out, I'll be honest, my second or my third day, I was like, I don't know if I could do this, because I had that moment of like, nobody here is really normal. Everybody that seems to be here is kind of like, there's something up with them, and that's why they're here. They had to get away from normal society. They're kind of ADHD, not ADHD, but like super anxious or socially awkward or just kind of weird or frazzy. So it's like, I don't know if I'm going to make any real friends here. And the other people were being super cliquey. I was just like super mentally down on myself. And I'm like thinking of jumping ship and leaving. And I'm like, I don't know if I could do this. So I call my parents. My dad's like, look, just try it for a week. And like, if you can do it for a week, try another week. And then pretty soon you're not going to think about it anymore. And so he's like, you went out there to do this. You should really try it before you leave. You're going to regret it. So that was really good advice. And that's what I did. So I just didn't think about it for a week, and the weeks bled into more weeks, and things went on. So I'm glad I decided to listen because that was really good advice. And yeah, I mean, so yeah, the next point I have written here was the altitude was really rough. So keep in mind we're like a mile up. So altitude's funny where when you're at a high altitude, like you don't immediately notice that it's different, but when you start moving a little too fast and start speed walking, it's like I couldn't even speed walk for like more than a minute at first before getting a little out of breath. And keep in mind, this was post COVID. I was not in good shape at all when I went up there. So I was like, I got to take it slow. I got to get my sleep. I got to get all my water. So I bought like a giant iron flask, 64 ounce, 1 gallon iron flask, and just kept it on my belt at all times, full of water. And I bought those Crystal Geyser 2 gallon jugs and just would dump the jugs into my tinier jug and put that on my belt. So I had a giant water bottle hanging on my belt like every day. It was probably pretty iconic. And it would clink, clink, clink when I would walk, but it was super useful. So I would always have water. I would share it with people and all that stuff. It's like, yeah, you don't want to run out of water with high altitude. Like you'd be screwed. You get, sickness. So that helped a lot. And the next thing I did, which nobody else seemed to do, was I took it slow on the drinking because I was pretty old for people there. I was 24 when I got there. So everybody else that showed up was like 18, 19, 20, 21 at the least or at the most, because they were all like runaways. Like, oh, I don't want to be home. I'm an adult now. I'm going to run to Yosemite from wherever I'm from, across the country. So they were all pretty young. They were still getting used to indulgence and self-control and discipline as far as drinking. So they would all just show up and drink. And you get drunk way faster at high altitude because your blood is way thinner because you're higher up. So the alcohol just hits you straight. It's like one shot, you'll probably be extra buzz. It's probably 1 to 3 ratio at high altitude. So people drink what they think is normal and they're just like sick. So I took it slow with that for sure. I didn't want to go crazy. So they had some parties and that was that. Let's see. Next up, I have the fun chapter, more friends. So this was when things started to really pick up and I started to really have fun and I was like enjoying myself. It's when every week we would get a couple more people, and then one week, I think in like April, mid-April, we got like 10 new people and they were all people I liked. I wasn't shunning anybody else, but it was like 4 people here or there before I'd meet them all. I'd be like, hey, what's up? This was like a group of 10 people that I really liked and they were all fun and they were my age. A lot of them were guys, so we'd hang out and drink and stuff. So the first one that I liked at first, his name was Josiah, and he was from Florida. So he was pretty open, and I would walk and hang out with him. He was like a cool guy. He seemed to like music, and we kind of bonded over like, I don't know, we'd have conversations about personalities of people and the way people perceive you and stuff like that. So I like people that can talk about things like that, just fun, like that philosophical but not philosophical stuff. We just got off to talking about that. I don't remember why, but I think he just started off saying like, oh, people usually see me this way, but blah, blah, blah. And it's like, oh, okay. But he was dropping like red flags left and right. So I probably should have listened, but he was like, oh yeah, after a month, people usually feel like they hate me. I was like, huh? And then he's like, if I was in Harry Potter, I'd be a Slytherin because I'm really cunning and I always get my way. I was like, okay. I was like, whatever. I don't care. But it was like, that's some weird shit to say. So we would hang out a bit, and then he met my roommate Traveler, and they were both from really close places in Florida, so they bonded over that, and they became pretty good friends, and they would get up into trouble all the time too. He joined the gang of people that stayed up till 4 a.m., so he fit in pretty well. And then I met one of my favorite groups of people that I met in Yosemite was these 2 guys from Buffalo. So one's name's Tony, the other one's name's Colin. They're from Buffalo, New York, and shout out if they ever find this. You guys are awesome. But they were iconic because one of them was extremely buff. He always had a buzz cut, and he'd walk around like he knew he was the shit because he was. And he seemed really tough at first. I'm like, this guy does not look friendly at all. I'm like, okay. Like, he just seems like he's going to be a jerk when you see him at first because he's got a scowl on his face. He's big. He's like, oh, it's like, oh, God, he's probably just like, real aggressive or whatever. But he's always hanging out with his friend who's this tall guy who's always got a smirk on his face. He's got these big glasses, and he always, no matter what time of day it was, had his Buffalo Bills cap just always on. So biggest fan of the Bills ever. And so these 2 became my good friends, but at first I did not like them at all, which is always how it works. It's kind of funny. But not only did, Tony look kind of intimidating or just like unfriendly at first, I was like, okay, what's going on? So the first night they show up, I don't know them very well, but I just got off work. I'm super tired. I worked out that day at the gym because I was trying to get in shape, get used to the altitude. So I was beat. And then they show up and they're like, "Hey, do you guys want to do this short hike to this place called the Couch? It's like really cool. It's like a short little hike. It's not even a mile long, but it's up here really close to camp and you can see this amazing view." So I was like, "Okay." So they were asking a little bit of people, and the next thing you know, everybody wants to join in, and pretty soon the whole camp of like 20 people wants to go. So everybody's bringing their drinks. They think it's going to be a real chill hike. I'm wearing, I think I had my hiking boots, or like I had something on. I might have had Vans on. Like I feel like I didn't have the right shoes for it, but I thought it was going to be chill, so I didn't show up with anything. People were passing out beers, like, "Oh, let's go, let's hang out." I bring my water. I show up, and we start going. And not only is this not a short hike. It's not flat ground. I don't know what I expected. It's like straight up 45 degrees vertical at least, climb for like 25 minutes, just straight altitude training all the way up to the side of this mountain. And this was my third day here, and I was not in shape at all. Meanwhile, these two guys were in really good shape because I learned later they used to be movers, so they were just super good in shape. Just for like, whatever, what the fuck, you guys need to hurry up. Everybody's falling behind. I'm in the back end of the line, making sure nobody gets left behind. These girls are there, and they didn't know what it was going to be like, and they're wearing like flip flops, and they're just like struggling. I'm like, okay, nobody left behind. Like, come on. And I'm just like wheezing, couldn't make it, and like, I did, but eventually we get to the very last ramp, and there's like way too many people to actually hang out on the very top of the area, which is like this rocky little chair almost, which is why it's called the Couch. It's like this flat kind of couch shaped zone for people to hang out on, and there's too many people. So people are messing around and drunk, and Josiah's there, and he's on the edge of the cliff, which is like hundreds of feet up, and he's just drinking and like dancing around, and he almost falls over, and someone has to grab him. I'm like, oh my god. So I'm glad that didn't happen. That would have put a damper on things. And we're hanging out there, and I was mad because I felt like these guys tricked us because they're like, "Oh, it's real short." So I was pissed off. I had to walk so far, and I got super winded, and I was like, "These guys suck. They probably tricked us, or they just didn't give a shit." And they hung out with this person they always called Ma, and I thought it was their mom, and they were making her do the hike too, and she hated it. She was like, having no fun because she's mom aged or whatever, and she's like, "This sucks. I hate this." So I thought they put her through it too. I'm like, these guys are the worst. I'm like, what's going on? So I really had a bone to pick with them at first, and I was like, oh my god. So I was like, okay, these two, and that was that. But that was pretty fun, and we made our way down, and we kind of hung out, and more and more people started moving in every week, and finally I got to talking to Tony and Colin. And at first it was like, "Oh, what's up? Like, how you doing?" And then we kind of talked about each other, and I was skeptical at first, and then the Tony was pretty quiet at first, I think, and they talked about where they were from, and they actually ended up telling me their reason for coming was that one of their best friends lived at the park and worked there, and he passed away from like a tragic like hiking accident. Like, so they flew in all the way from Buffalo. They saved up and they came to Yosemite, kind of live where he lived and honor him and like hang out where he was, and kind of just do it as like a form of remembrance and stuff. It's like, well, damn, that's really touching. And I saw like the different side of them, and I was talking to them about it, and they were really upfront about it, so I respected their sincerity. And then they just started saying about how what they came from and who they were, and they started wanting to have fun. So they're like, "Oh, let's play like this card game we play back home," or it was a dice game. They taught us two different kinds. So the first one was this round of dice, which was super fun, but it's a way for people to lose money. So the thing is Colin is kind of a hustler. He knows how to move money and get people to give up money. I didn't bet a lot of money in, and I don't think a lot of people did because we were all poor at that point. But if he had talked to us like a few weeks down the road, he would have probably got some more money. So this dice game, the rules are basically you sit in a circle and somebody rolls the first hand, and the only rules are whoever rolls the highest wins. So that I think it's three dice. So if you roll a pair of three sixes, it's the highest roll, and you just instantly win, right? Nobody can beat that. But if you roll, I think it is two threes and a two, you lose. That's like a losing roll. But everything else is fair game. So you want to roll the highest amount of pairs. Like if you get two sixes and a five, I'm not sure if it's better than three fives. You know what I mean? So it's like poker rules, kind of a pair versus three of a kind. So you go in a circle and it goes real fast. Everyone puts in money, and whoever loses always pays, and whoever wins always wins all the money. So there's only one winner. So everybody's throwing money in, and you want to win. So you'll throw $5 in, the round will go. Someone will get three sixes, maybe. Very rarely, he'll just take all the money. Next round, go, 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 go. 5 rounds have passed in 10 minutes. You've lost $40. You're like, what's going on? So super fast paced, but really fun. When we were playing with money, it was fun. We did it a bunch of times. So that was like a fun game. Another game they did was this. It's called like Commander. It had like a name like that, like Commander or something like that. But it's a card game where you put down cards, and every card has a different rule, and you have to fulfill the rule. And if you don't fulfill the rule, you lose, which means you have to drink. So it's like a drinking game. And so it's like, oh, you pulled a seven. Seven means, I think, like seven means you have to always say like your name. Everyone has this. Okay, you pull a seven. Everybody has to say your name at the start of a sentence, and if they don't, they drink, and then they get penalized. So stuff like that. And then after like 10 cards have been drawn, everyone's speaking gibberish or doing stupid shit, and it's like Simon Says almost. And if you don't do it, you have to drink. So it's pretty fun. But that was a fun one. So we started bonding, and I had a lot of fun with them, and we was getting to know them. They became some of my best friends there. So I was like, okay, and slowly the row of tents was filling up. We were starting to have more people that showed up. We were getting having get-togethers, and one big thing we did, which I'll always remember, is we all gathered up one night when like a bunch of new people showed up, so they didn't have to work, and we went out to the valley, which is the Valley, which is where it's just flat grass, and there's this boardwalk, wooden walkway, and you walk out there and you just lay down and look up at the stars, and it's super pretty, super chill. People can play music, but it's just super dark. Nobody has lights on or their phone, and you just look up at the stars, and super nice. And we had like 20, 30 people there, passing drinks around, whatever. And as time went on, we would have gatherings, and we sort of would have run-ins with the housing officers. So like if you've ever been to college or you know about college life, like it's pretty similar where there are these people that walk around and they're like the housing officers. So they're think of like an RA. So like an RA though is like a student officer. These are like real people with jobs that have like a some form of authority. They're not policemen, but they have the authority to get you kicked out of the park. So that we would start having run-ins with them where anytime we gathered, even if it was like everybody in their own area and like nobody was trying to sleep, um, it wouldn't even be quiet hours, which I think was past 8 o'clock. So we'd be gathered at like 6 o'clock, just hanging out, playing music and cards and drinking. They'd come by and break it up like every time. So it's like, where do we go? And then we try to go to the boardwalk, which is the name for the Valley Wood Boardwalk I was talking about. And sometimes that'd get broken up. The people would show up and say, "This isn't open yet," and they'd make us leave. And it's like, well, we live here. And like, we don't care. You have to leave. So we're thinking, where are we gonna get together? Like, what are we gonna do to actually congregate? We need somewhere to go. So that begins the new arc. And this is a big one. So this is called the community center arc. And this was one of the things I was most proud of, even if it didn't go exactly how I wanted to, but this was a good arc. So let me get a big sip of water. How's it going so far? Anybody digging this story? All right. So the community center. So this was a big one. So there's this abandoned building that I didn't pay much mind to because it was never open, but I'm on one end of the tent row by the kitchen and bathrooms, right? The other end of the tent row, probably 20 tents down, so 200, 300, 400 feet down. Um, there's this bigger building. It's probably twice the size of the kitchens. It's like a box shape instead of a rectangle. And it's just closed down, and it's this big building. And I always thought it was like just a shed or some kind of like, I don't even know, a worker area. But no one ever paid mind to it because nobody knows the lore because everybody's new here. I'm like one of the oldest people here. I've been there for a month. So I'm looking at this building, and I get to talking to some of the older guys that have been there, and they said like, "Oh, that's the abandoned community center. That's where we used to hang out, but it's been shut down for 2 years since 2019, and nobody goes there anymore." And I'm like thinking, "Well, why not?" And they're like, "Well, they closed it off since like a snowstorm hit it, and they just haven't opened it up since." So I was like, "Huh." So I'm thinking in my head, and I'm thinking of that community center, right? And I'm thinking of how we have this problem where none of us can get together. And I'm like, well, what if I just did it myself and I just got people together, and as a team we fixed it up and we made it a new place for us to hang out with. That's what we need. It would fix everybody's problems. So, like I said, the housing officers were breaking up large gatherings, no matter what time it was. So I'm like, this could be the perfect solution. So I was like, let's do a social project. And so I called out of work that day, and I made a plan with my friends. So I got Traveler, I got Zach, I got Tony, Colin, and my friend Adrian, who had just showed up. really funny guy. He was pretty new, but he had just showed up there, and I believe he came to help out. Yeah, he was definitely there because he was there for the aftermath. So um, we all got together, and it was about it's a normal weekday. Nobody had work except for me, so I called out, and we got cleaning supplies together. We asked certain people from their tents if they had like a broom, a dustpan, trash bags, gloves, all that stuff. So I got together some of my water. I got some trash bags that I brought. I brought my gloves, and we showed up there. And we found out the way in because one of my friends had gone ahead and like scouted it out and noticed that one of the doors was just open. So we kept that door open and we just went in and we just cleaned it all up. We like swept, we dusted, we got rid of the cobwebs, we moved the furniture around, we cleaned everything like the walls. I was kind of trying to give people some jobs to do, make sure everyone was working. It was pretty fun. I don't usually do stuff like that, but it actually turned out pretty well. So for about 3 or 4 hours, we cleaned it. We worked ourselves to the bone, rearranged the furniture, figured out like, oh, there's a TV there. Like if somebody had like a Switch or a GameCube, we could bring it over and use it. So we're making all these plans, like, oh, we can do this or that. They had board games, they had books. It's like all this nice stuff, and it's like this is totally closed off when they're not letting us use it at all. And it looked fine. Like there was like if you look at an office, there's like those ceiling panels that you can take out, and there's like maybe the vents are up there. So like one of those was popped out, and that's it. It wasn't like the roof was caving in, and there was a suspicious like black little puddle, not a puddle, but like a dry splotch of what could have been mold, but it wasn't huge. So it's like, oh, we could just spray that, right? So the whole time we're doing this, we had to be careful not to get caught because we weren't sure how the officers were going to react if they saw us in there because it is technically closed down. So we kept pretty sneaky. We left in like shifts. We made sure the area was clear when we left. Pretty fun, kind of covert. And so when I left, when we were done, I went to go use the restroom, and I was hanging out by my tent and walking back. And I remember, I think Adrian came up to me and it was like, "Hey, Grant, like, I think it's Zach. Zach got caught leaving, and one of the housing officers grabbed him and is talking to him, and it's like he's in trouble." So I was like, "Oh God, I got to go." So I ran off to go see what was going on. Wanted to make sure we weren't going to get busted. And Zach had left, but I walked into the community center and I had like this movie scene showdown with the officer. So I walk in, and there's the officer. We'll call him Officer E because this is a real person with a real job, and he still works there. And the story will lead one way and go the other. So I get in there, and it's just me and him. I'm in one entrance, and he'd walked in the other way. So he's in the complete end of this long building, but we both see each other. The sun's coming in. It's super clean in there. You can see the dust everywhere. He's like checking out the cleanliness with his finger. It's like some real like Inglorious Bastard shit. And he's standing there, and he's like, "Huh." It's like, "I see you clean this place up." He's like, "How long did this take you guys?" And I was like, "Oh, a few hours." He's like, "Well, you really did a good job, but I'm sorry to tell you this is like closed off." And I'm like, "Oh." And so I'm thinking, well, why is it closed off? Because it looks fine to me. So I ask him, like, well, why is it closed off? And he's like, "Oh, there was a snowstorm and it's been condemned." And I'm thinking, like, so what? That's what I'm thinking to myself. This place is super clean now. It looks livable. There's that panel that fell down. The roof's intact. I've seen the whole thing from the outside. And so he says, "Don't come back around here. Sorry you guys put so much effort into this, but you need to go." And I'm thinking, huh. So it was this like showdown kind of meeting of the minds, the two factions. And so I leave there and I'm going back to my tent. We all kind of had like a defeat rendezvous at my tent area. Whoa, what did I just do? I went to the bottom. I'll press that button. And I'm sitting in front of my tent with my lawn chair. I'm just kind of stewing, thinking. And my friend Colin's there and he's like, "Never seen you this way where you've been so like frustrated." That I always remember that because it probably did look that way. I'm usually pretty happy. So I'm thinking, put all that work into it. I'm feeling like we got defeated and this is like the end of it and we just wasted our time. So, like I said, I was skeptical of it and I eventually decided this was too much work to waste. So, we're just going to get someone's mold spray. I talked to Josiah, whose job was housekeeping, and he found mold spray at his work. So he's like, "I'll give you mold spray tomorrow during my shift. You could just spray the area and it'll be gone, right? It's a little pool, no bigger than like if someone dropped their ice cream cone, right?" So I'm like, "Well, that's that." And I said, "I don't want to give up." So one thing I said is, "You know what? We're going to say screw it. We're going to come back tonight. We're going to go in there and we're going to just hang out there and sit in our achievements that we cleaned it up and hang out and play cards, drink, do whatever." So we go there, and that night we all meet up and we go in there. We brought some other people that were new and told them about it. Like, hey, you want to come hang out here? And everyone's like, sure. Like, there's nowhere else to fucking hang out. Like, of course I want to go there. So we get some new guys, and it's pitch black. It's nighttime. We sneak in, and it's like totally dark, like I said. And so we're thinking, well, we need some light. So what are we gonna do? And so for some reason, this was where I made my mistake. We came to a consensus of, oh, let's put blankets and like boxes, like cardboard, cut up cardboard boxes over the windows so no one could see in. And we'll just turn the overhead lights on, the big lights in the building. And no one could see it, right? Because the windows are covered. So not a good idea. It would have been probably just smarter to cover the windows and use like a lantern or somebody's mobile light, just barely illuminated, right? Just chill in like a dimly lit area so nobody can see in. But we weren't that smart. So this is where it kind of started to fall apart. We hung around for about 45 minutes, played cards, people were smoking, just drinking, like listening to music, just chilling, actually having a place to congregate and hang out for once, which was awesome. It was huge. I could imagine 50 people in there comfortably, just all doing their own thing. There was a piano, there was like a ping pong table, books, board games, all this stuff, all these different tables. It's like we put it all back together, dining room. People could come eat there. It's like, dude, this would be perfect like if it just worked. But nope. They could see the lights, so we're playing cards, and somebody walks in we don't recognize, and it's a new housing officer, and he says to us, "What are you guys doing in here?" And then he said, "I heard you guys clean this place up, but you're not allowed in here." And he's talking to us. We're all like, "God damn it!" And then as we're talking, it's like straight from a movie. My friend Adrian like busts out of the bathroom and he says something like, "Man, it's really fucked up in there." Like he doesn't know the guy's there yet, and he looks around and he sees that we're talking to the housing officer, and like no one reacted to him, and he's like, "Oh." So stupid, but that situation. But I was like, "Oh my god." So the housing officer basically laid it out where he said, "Hey, if I see you guys in here again, you're gonna get arrested for trespassing." And I was like, "Oh my god." So that sucked. So I was like, I was starting to kind of develop a rivalry with these guys because it seemed like they were just flaunting their authority, making our lives harder, just like not giving us any avenues for like solutions, just basically reducing our rights, reducing our ability to hang out, do anything. So as a worker, it's like, what do we do here? We just work and there's like no recreation. Like we can't go to the tourist areas. Everything's overpriced. There's no bar for the employees. There's no hangout spots. Go out to nature and just be in the dark. And it's like, I guess, but where do we hang? So that was starting to like, I was starting to have a bone to pick with them. So that was pretty much that situation. So it taught me a lesson that basically the company could have totally restored that place. Would have taken them a few months, but they just chose not to. And they'd rather restore the money making things for the past 3 years and not restore something that brings the workers happiness. So I got a real good picture of the way things are laid out here. We get a sip of my water. So that being that, it was a bonding experience. We had fun. We all remembered that. Showed us we were willing to do something. It brought us together, but didn't work out. But that's okay. Yeah, I'll always remember that because it was an honest attempt. This place taught me a lot about my own personal morality, where there was clearly laws in place or rules from these people. And I'd always thought I was kind of an establishment person, like, oh, the rules, the rules, the rules. And I get here and the rules aren't fair. They're bent against me, and I'm doing things that are outside the rules, but I'm doing them for my own personal code to try to help other people. And it really enforced that part of me that from like ages 19 to 23, I was super anti-authority. I didn't hate my bosses at work, but it's like I just hated being told what to do. I tried to just have my own work be my merit, and if anyone like steered me a certain way, I would get mad or resentful. It was very childish. So I developed that into more mature, like using my own code that I feel like helps people, not myself, and getting justification from that. So this was a big part of my life that was like, you can do things that are right by you, that help people, that aren't going to be part of the rules, and it still might not work out, but you can say at least you tried. So that was a lot of the situation in Yosemite, was learning about the factions and the company itself, which was this overruling thing we're going to get into that just was like super stilted toward them. The workers had little to no rights. We were told going in there, you don't have any rights till 60 days because the union doesn't cover you until you're off probation, which I learned was a big lie because it's like they do have coverage. You are covered for the first 60 days, but people are going around spreading lies purposefully to get you to work and obey. So, and be scared. It's like, is that a good place to work? Not really, in my opinion. So I started to see things for what they were. Let's say that. The next chapter here is a happy one, and it's called the Jamaicans, because my whole time being there, and when I was even initially told about Yosemite, I was told like, oh, a lot of exchange students come, or not students, exchange workers from other parts of the world. It could be as far away as like East Asia or Japan, things like that. And people come from all over, and they come there to work because it's like an exchange program in their country. It's a national park. It's world famous, right? Because the whole time I'm living there, I'm seeing people from all over the world coming to visit as tourists. So same for the workers. But the thing was, is since COVID, the big C, nobody was coming by, and this no, we hadn't had what they were. I think they were called J1s. I don't know what it stands for, but it means the exchange program. No J1s for the last 3 years. It's just been domestic boys and girls. So, unbeknownst to me, a big group of people from Jamaica came in about a group of 40 to 50. And I noticed because I go to the rec center, to the gym, and I just see all these people that are wearing the identical uniform. And they're like all hanging out together wearing green jackets and beanies. It's like they're already workers, but it's like I've never seen any of these workers before. I'm like, what's going on? And they're all hanging out on their phones, talking, like checking in, and they're just occupying the whole rec center. I'm like, oh, cool, like a bunch of new people. So I'm chilling, and I think I learned at that point you can sit certain spots by the rec center and pick up the Wi-Fi there. So I think I was like downloading some music or checking the internet, checking my Discord maybe, doing something. And I'm on there, a little bench, and this group of three guys come by. These Jamaican guys I never met before. They're like, "Oh, wagwan." That's what they said, like wagwan. And I'm like, "What?" I'm like, "What does that mean?" And it's like, "Oh, what's up?" And they're like, "Oh," I'm like, "Hey." And so I get to talking to them. They're like, "Oh, my name's Mario. This is Nicholas, and this is Meeks," which I still don't know what that's short for, but those were their names. These are the big three that I ran with the most. So I'm talking to them, and they're asking me things which I had just learned myself. But they're like, "Oh, like, is this true that there's like grizzly bears out there and like they can come eat us in the night? Because that's what people were telling us, is there's going to be bears and we should watch out." And I'm like, oh no, like, what I know is there's no grizzly bears here, nothing dangerous. The only thing you got to look out for is a mountain lion, but that's if you're a small child or a dog. They go after small things, so you guys are going to be fine because they're all full-grown men. Like, there's no bears, don't worry about it. And the way they smiled and looked at each other and looked at me, you would think that they thought that I had killed the bears myself. That's the impression I got. It was because I relayed this news to them. They looked like I was the guy, John Muir, who went around and just like tamed the lands. But they were like, "Oh, hell yes." They're like, "Oh, thanks, man." And they were like, "We'll keep in touch." And I was like, "Oh, well, what job are you going to be?" And I'm like, "Well, we were all cooks." And I was like, "Oh, I hope you work with me. I work in the kitchen, yada, yada, yada." So we got to know each other pretty well. And I felt like I was the first person they talked to because they probably just came from the rec center and just showed up. Because that's the address they give you to come to when you first sign up, is the rec center. So they just probably just came and walked and saw me. And I think I had my no, I didn't have that yet. So my iconic accessory, didn't get that yet. So that was pretty fun. So over the next few days when I'm talking to people, they're like, "Hey, have you?" Well, they wouldn't even ask me if I've met the Jamaicans. They're like, "You talked to the Jamaicans, right?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Why do you know?" And they're like, "Because they're going around and they're asking everyone, 'Oh, have you met Grant? Have you met Grant?'" And they're like my PR guys. They're like, "Oh, he's the best. Like, we know him. We know Grant." And I'm like, "What?" And so all my friends are running into the Jamaican guys and they're all talking about me because I was like the first guy they met. They're like, "Oh, do you know Grant? Do you know Grant?" And all the Jamaicans live in this they put the transfer people, like workers, in this area called Boys Town, probably because it used to be all boys or something. But if you think about it, it sounds like a Caribbean town, like Boys Town, Jamaica. It sounds like like Jamestown, Kingston. It sounds like a Caribbean town, so it's pretty funny. They're all in this little zone called Boys Town. So my friends were saying that the Jamaicans know me so well that I'm pretty much like the Duke of Boys Town. That was one of my nicknames. It was super funny because the Jamaican dudes just went around like for their first week and just told everybody about me and asked if anyone knew who I was. Super funny. But those Jamaican dudes were super friendly. So the next week, like four of those guys came into the kitchen to actually work with me. I was super hyped. It's like, oh, four new guys that are super cool. Like, I don't care if they know anything about cooking or anything. I don't care. So of course the Chef C, as he has done with me, he said, "Oh, you got your cooks are going to be training you. I don't have time to train you. This guy doesn't train anybody." So he gives us shadows. So I shadow my new friend Mario, who's one of the guys I met and talked to about the bears. And so basically Mario shadows me and I show him how to work the pasta station. So I'm training somebody, And I later learned that Mario is like super experienced. He knows exactly what he's doing. He even like would politely correct me on things like the order of which you store food, like meat goes on the bottom, vegetables on top, because the way the rising fumes work or whatever it is, the correct order. I still remember. But I was like, oh, you knew that. Because I'd be putting it on the trays on the racks. And he's like, are you sure it's that way? Are you sure it's not the other way, like in the nicest way possible? And I was like, huh. And then I look at the graph on the wall, and I was like, "Oh, you're right." I was like, "Did you know that all along?" He's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "God damn it!" So this dude's like a super chef, and he's from like cruise ships, so he's probably going hardcore, cooking for everybody every day. That was his business before this. So I get to train him, and even still, that he knows all that, he still has to learn what everything is, and you got to learn the vocabulary and like all that. So I'm training him. Not only am I training somebody, but we're also having the busiest day of work ever. So this was my busiest day. So I worked on what was called the pasta station, which they would just start putting me on because the chef didn't want to see me anymore. So you're basically Subway style assembling a bowl of pasta. They're all the same. It's just like penne noodles with tomato sauce, parmesan, mozzarella. You're just putting them in bowls and throwing them in an oven. But you have to do about 8 per tray, and it takes some time. You got to preload them. And usually you have the entire area to yourself. It's you and your assistant, if you even have one. And they come through the oven in about 8 to 10 minutes. And on the other side, you sprinkle them with basil, put them on a tray, like a cart, wheel the cart over to the hot boxes, put them in the hot boxes, and those lead to the other side, which is where the serving stations are. The servers grab them out of the hot box because there's two doors, 2 sets of doors, one on each side. So you can basically push them hypothetically straight through to the serving area so they can grab it out. It's cool. So that's the rotation, right? So normally there's 2 people back there, so there's not a lot of traffic because you're in your own little branch. You just have oncoming traffic from your way to the hot boxes, which are down this little hallway. And the chef's office is there where there's not a lot of traffic there. And the storage area is there, but everybody walks around the other way. So it's pretty clear, right? No, not today. Not only am I training somebody, not only is it the busiest day of work ever, but also they're doing this new thing where they're going to be transitioning the entire kitchen from buffet to pizza in a week. And nobody knows what the hell that is. Nobody knows what's going on. But in order to do that, they have to train people on what to do with pizza. So the head chef is actually showing Nicholas, one of the new Jamaican guys, how to use the pizza station. And guess where the pizza station is? It's directly across the small little room for the pasta station. So he's on the other side of the station. I keep saying station, but that's what everything's called in the kitchen. This station, that station. The like ingredients area. So he's on the other side of the cabinet, just working over there, coming to and fro, using up half of our items and resources, making life hell. So every tray has about 8 pieces of pasta, and I think that night I went through about like 70 trays, which is like a record. My friend Daniel, who worked there, he's from Rome. He was a super cool guy. Got to meet somebody that's actually from Europe. You could tell he spoke really good English, but he had different like mannerisms or things he would do. Like one thing that was really odd is I guess in Europe, when someone wants to get behind you, instead of tapping you on the shoulder, they take their 2 fingers and they poke your sides, like on your ribs, and you're like, oh, and that's how they notify you that they're behind you. I'm like, what the fuck? It feels so odd. And I asked him like, oh, is that like or like an Italian thing? He's like, oh yeah, sorry, I'm sorry about that. That's just a habit. Like that's what we do over there. I'm like, oh my god, it's so jarring. But super cool guy. He was like the pasta expert. I don't know if they stereotypically put him there or maybe he wanted to be there. Chicken and egg, I don't know. But he was always the guy. I told him how many trays I did. His jaw like hit the floor. He's like, I've never done that many in my entire time here. I've been here 3 years. I'm like, I know, it was crazy. So yeah, but that was my one of my other prouder days. That was crazy. So I was doing 50 to 70 trays per night. They were always putting me on pasta station. It just kept me out of their face because I guess they just hated me. I swear, I don't cause problems at work. I don't get in arguments. I don't do anything. I do exactly what they tell me. And probably the only annoying thing I did was I'd finish my job and be like, what do you want me to do next? And there really wasn't a clear way for that to be, dispensed to people. The information communication system there wasn't very good. So it's not like there was an easy way for me to figure out what I'm going to be doing that day. They figure it out on the fly. They're like, oh, you're here, you do this. So it's not like I could just, whatever. But I got to know Mario really well. He shadowed me for about a week, and I got to know him super well. And the fun thing is that he we like had lunch together like one of the first days. He's like, oh, let me show you some pictures, and I was like, okay. And he's like shows me his phone. And I shit you not, this guy, he's got like this picture of like a table back home that it's got like a shit ton of drugs, some white stuff on the table, a big giant like assault rifle, like an AR-15 type, maybe M16, a bunch of other guns, like all this. He's like, look at this, bro. I'm like, huh? He's like, this is what I do back home. And I'm like, huh? So these guys were super hardcore back home. They're doing anything to make money. They're running weapons. They tell me they used to buy weapons from pirates and like sell drugs, and that was their like thing. And the people they know would get shot up and this and that. They're basically gangsters from Jamaica, like running stuff. And so like yeah, that shocked me, but it's like they're super nice in the park because what happens is they get this job and they're going to be making like like 5 times as much money in US dollars, which is stronger than the Jamaican dollar. And they're going to be like, if as long as they can be good and have good job security, they can stay here and make hella money and come back like rich. So they're just going to be on their best behavior. It's like they don't even do that stuff. So it was super weird, and it's probably better I met them with them doing that job than them doing their other job. But I got to hear a lot of interesting stories about that, and they were all pretty good guys. But it's funny to think that they were like that back home because you just can't tell. Like they all just seem pretty normal. They'd smile and laugh with each other, and some of them kept to themselves, but some of them were super friendly, and it's like holy shit. So yeah, you have questions about certain things, I can tell you myself. So, and you can always ask questions in chat. I'll get to them. But something that I want to tell people, but I can't say everything on here because I don't want to. It's just not good for posterity and those people. And but if you know me in person, feel free to ask. Let's see. But I got really close with them. They were super nice here, and they obviously weren't doing any kind of illegal activity in the park because they wanted to keep their job. So what could I do really? Like that was that. As far as I know, they weren't going around killing people. They were just selling stuff. So, anyways, um, they taught me a lot of their slang. So they call it the Jamaican patois. So they taught me a lot of terms, and I can go around and say some of the terms, but it's going to sound cringy that I'm doing an accent. But you have to do the accent because that's how the words are said. It's like in Spanish class, you got to learn to actually use the accent to say the Spanish words. You got to get over the embarrassment and actually do it because that's how it's meant to sound. Can't be a white guy just being like, donde está la baño. You got to actually kind of roll with it, get the accent going, let the words flow. So, and it wasn't, they didn't give a shit. They were teaching it to me. They wanted me to say it that way. They'd correct me on my pronunciation. Wagwan. You got to say it that way. So that was a lot of fun. That was a really good cultural exchange. You don't get a lot of that day to day. So I enjoyed that a lot. And where am I on this? So one thing I did that I always remember is I brought a lot of my friends from Huff, and I was always telling the Jamaican guys, we got to hang out. Like, we're going to hang out one of these nights. Because they probably didn't have a lot of friends. They have each other, but they want to meet people. So I said, this night, because it's like my last night of work for the weekend, I'm going to hang out with you guys. We'll bring some drinks, and we'll drink some chips and stuff. We'll come meet you at Boys Town. We'll play cards. So we brought a lot of our friends. I brought one of my friends from work because he wanted to hang out with them. And they would all give us nicknames. They didn't give me a nickname, which was, I was expecting one, but I was just Grant because it's probably not a name they say a lot. So I had a friend named Severin who has like one of the coolest names I ever heard, Severin. And he worked in the kitchens, and he came along with me to the Boys Town meetup. He wasn't from Huff, but because he had been there a long time. But we went to Boys Town. We played cards. Me, Tony, Colin. I think my friend Jared was there. I know Severin was there. So they always called Severin because he worked with us. He showed up that day in like a tracksuit. It was like, I don't know if it was real velour, but it looked like velvet or felt. So they called him Silk Boss. Silk Boss. That was his nickname because he was like dressed in head to toe in silk, which is a pretty badass nickname. But he was like, huh? He's like, what does that mean? And they're like, no, trust us. That's cool. That's like the name of one of our big time rappers back home. And I was like, okay, cool. They give out lots of nicknames and stuff, which was pretty fun. I think later they started calling me Cool Boy, which is cowboy, which because it was like I was going off to the stables. So keep in mind this has been longer than a month. So one thing I learned that happened is this job they promised me, the stables, kept getting pushed back. It was supposed to start in late April. Pretty soon it became early May. So I'm in late April. They're saying, oh, early May, 2 more weeks, 2 more weeks. So it kept getting delayed. But I would just keep working on. Things kept being interesting. So I didn't care. The job kind of stunk. It got really, it wore me down because I'll talk about it later, but some things happened there. So all in all, for the Jamaican arc, that card game was like the crowning thing. We had a lot of fun there. Everybody got to hang out. I hung out with them some more, but outside of work, that was like the big thing. And I would see them around a lot. I'd always say hey, because they would ride around on their bikes together and stuff. So they definitely made work a lot more fun. That was the biggest thing. I'd come into work, I'd be happy because I had a bunch of those guys there. We'd always hang out. There were even some instances where It was some stupid shit. So it's like one as things were going bad at work, like a lot of political stuff started happening. I don't mean like democratic debate type crap. I mean like inner politics of the work environment. One time I thought I overheard someone saying they didn't like me. He was always kind of weird with me. Like he just seemed like somebody who would go and like snitch about stuff. And I wasn't doing anything, but it's like you don't want people working against you at your level. They're reporting to the higher ups, right? It's no good. So I thought I overheard some guy saying like, I don't even like Grant. Like he kind of annoys me. I'm like, huh. I mean, he seems like the type because he was kind of weird. Like I was always nice to him, but there was one time where the Jamaicans and I were there. Me, Severin, and the Jamaicans were hanging out, and this guy who was supposed to be off the shift at like 8, which is before closing, right? 8's when the store closes, so he's supposed to leave at 8, but he decides to stay late for whatever reason and just try to maybe pick up extra hours or whatever. But he was supposed to be gone. 8 o'clock rolls around, all the chefs leave. It's just me and the Jamaicans and Severin, and we're blasted. We're like, we're super tired, so we're like, we're gonna go take a long break because nobody's here. We deserve it, so we're gonna go take like a 20-30 minute break outside. So we go sit outside, take a long break, just chill, talk, whatever, chewing up the fat or whatever. And the dude who's left, who's supposed to have left by now, Mr. 8 o'clock, comes out and sees us out there. Doesn't say anything, but he walks back in. So I think from that point on, I'm one of the people he hates because he, in his mind, thinks that, oh, I can't leave because they're not here. They're not doing anything. And it's like, dude, you're gone. Are not supposed to be here. Nothing that's after 8 is your responsibility or your prerogative to fix. So he puts it on himself to get mad at us for taking a break because he thinks that it's transferring the work to him or some crap. And I'm like, okay. So I think ever since then he didn't like me. So anyways, back to the thing is when things started going down at work, which I'll get into. Keep in mind this guy was not a friend of mine. He was like straight Mr. Management. He decided to side with whoever has more power, which is not me. I'm just some cook. But he's like saying he didn't think I was there because I was hunched over. He's like, I don't even think I like Grant. So I sanctioned the Jamaican guys. I met up with them and I was like, listen up, guys. I don't know why I thought I could do this, but it worked. We were friends, but I was like, listen up, guys. So and so, this guy, been talking weird about me. I'm not sure about him. Can you guys keep an eye on him for me and let me know if he says anything weird? And so I'm running these like schemes. And so we have powwows and we're like an inner faction in the work. So it was super useful. But speaking of factions, like one thing I did because I had worked in lots of jobs, this job was super different because the break culture was weird. They like the way they enforced breaks was weird. The way they enforced the employee meals was weird. So I started feeling undervalued. So I really tried to create a camaraderie with certain coworkers who were like in on it. So a lot of things with unions are there's the hard asses that are like, I'm Mr. Work. I'm gonna work, work, work. I don't care. I don't want rights. I just want to work. If you don't want to work and you want rights or some shit, like you suck. I don't want to be with you. There's that kind of person, right? So there were some people like that there. There's also people who are kind of just there to please the management. They don't want to get in trouble. That's their biggest fear is getting in trouble with the management. So they'll do anything. They'll blow with the wind and do anything management wants. And they're not going to cause a stink, right? You don't want them on your team because they're always just going to rat you out or run away and go talk to management to try to save their own ass, right? And then there's the people who are there to work. They understand their value and they also want, a necessary amount of rights. And sometimes this overlaps Venn diagram style with people who are a little too greedy, don't work at all, and they overstate their value. So you don't really want those people. But there weren't a lot of people like that there because those kinds of people kind of get weeded out because the work is so demanding at the kitchen. So I got with the people, like 2 or 3 other people besides the Jamaican guys that were those perfect kind they know their value, they wanted more rights, they understand they're being exploited. So we had this kind of inner circle, right? And we would kind of start figuring out things weren't so good here, and we need to start calling the management on their BS because what I had learned later is our union rep, who's supposed to be doing this for us, was not there. He was injured for 3 months. I didn't even know we had one because I had not been there for 3 months yet. So this whole window, he was just gone. So I'm like, well, I'm going to invent the job and do it myself. I didn't even know we were supposed to have one. So we're an inner circle. So like one little thing we did is whenever we had to train the Jamaican guys, you're supposed to get something called training pay, which is 1.5 times pay because not only are you doing your job, you're training people, right? That was never revealed to us. No one said anything. They probably weren't going to bring it up until we brought it up. That's how it works in these situations. They just don't bring it up. They just pray. You don't know what the hell you're doing. Nobody reads the contract. We did. One of my very savvy friends, who was the senior cook because she had been there the longest, was super savvy on the union rules, this and that, scheduling. She was a great person to talk to for this stuff. She was like, hey, we need training pay. This is a new thing in this contract. So I'm glad you said that. So we got together, talked about it at our break. Stuff like this makes work fun for me, fighting the power. But We got together and we went and talked to the chef amicably, but we're like, here's the contract. It says we need to get paid for training pay. Are we going to do it? And he's like, I don't know. And it's like, well, it says here in the contract that this is what we need. So we're kind of putting the irons on because it's like, hey, man, step up. This is your responsibility. Like the contract already says it. There's really no decision here for you to make. And he did not like that at all. We weren't being dicks. We're not like, you need to pay us now. We're just like, here's what it says in the contract. You need to pay us. Like, this is what it says. Like, not you need to pay us, but like the contract says you need to do this. So we're asking you if you could please do this. And he was just like, I don't know. I'll think about it. We're like, well, there's really nothing to think about. So he did not like us. Like he put more of a black mark on us for that. So keep in mind. But we would do stuff like that, and maybe only one or two instances of that. But we all kind of as a unity, like a union, an inner circle, didn't really like the guy, the head chef, because he was very weird and petty, and he didn't like people like us. He liked the people that were they blew at the wind and they went for management. He wanted the suckers. He wanted the people that were scared to get fired, scared of management. He did not like people that knew their worth and stuck up for themselves. It was his nightmare. So he targeted us. We'll get into that later. But the Jamaicans helped me out. My inner circle helped me out a lot too. So yeah. So the next part is kind of sensitive because it is about my roommate Traveler, and I've kind of just not spoken about it, so I don't want you guys to feel tricked, but I'm trying to kind of put you in my mindset of how I was perceiving him up until now to kind of show you and illustrate the betrayal I felt when I learned the sort of things that I'm going to tell you here. So don't feel like before I was trying to trick you or mislead you, and that was just my thoughts at the time. I'm trying to keep it like a timeline base. So when I reveal this stuff, keep in mind that this, what I know now, is how I feel about this person. So anyways, let me get a drink of water. This is a long one too. All right. So, one thing about my roommate was my first roommate. His name was Traveler. He was my roommate for about 1.5 months. So ever since he came to the park, he was getting into trouble. So like every party we would have, he would always get flagged down by the officers, and they would pull him aside and warn him, and they were really on him. And I noticed that it was like different than everybody else. It was always him. So well, the one big thing was we were hanging out in the kitchen, and somehow he had gotten these little things of Patron. We were playing Five Finger Filet and drinking Patron. I didn't play Five Finger Filet. I want to slice my fingers off, but these young kids, you know. So Tony was doing it. He was going ham, and Traveler was doing it just kind of slow. Doesn't want to cut his fingers off, but of course Tony knows how to do it. Tony's like Drax the Destroyer from the Guardians of the Galaxy. That's who I think of when I see him. He's just like this big badass. You know, he's deep down, he's like a nice guy, but I never really went out and said that. He's a super nice guy, super smart, reads tons of books, has a lot to say, but it's just like on the exterior, he's like this intimidating, like really buff dude. So it's like, it's funny. And you get him to laugh. It's like the best thing ever. But, anyways, so he's there playing Five Finger Filet. Of course, he's fucking crazy. And he was someone who was inspired to work out because he used to get made fun of for how he looked. So now he's just like, that's like the deepest motivation ever. And he's never let go of that. So he's just super disciplined. He would go every day. So he's huge. But he's just like going ham with the Five Finger. So we're all hanging out in the kitchen. And of course, these guys come by. And I see that they're coming by the windows. And they don't look like residents. They're housing people. They got the beanies on, the jackets. I'm like, oh God. So I start trying to hide everything. I grab the Patron. I stick it in the freezer. Everything. And then they come by and they look in. And then the first check, they don't get anybody. They're like, what's going on? It's like, oh, we're just hanging out. Whatever. Like, okay. They probably smelled some alcohol or something. They're looking around to see everybody and see who's what age, because they kind of know everybody's age already. They looked it up and they've got it written down somewhere, right? So that was kind of like, okay, the party's dying down because I don't want to do that. But of course, Traveler and some other people like Zach and them that stay up late, they're like, we want to keep going. So I leave because I always had this danger sense, like Spider-Man, where it's like, something's going to happen if I stay here. I'm just going to leave. So like 4 or 5 times in my trip or my stay in Yosemite, it was like, every time I'd leave, like 10 minutes later, someone would come in and like everyone would get in trouble. So I never got like written up or anything. So once again, I leave 10, 15 minutes later, I'm in my tent and I don't hear anything. But the story I was told later was the housing people came back. They figured out who everybody was, whose age they were, and they had the drink out this time. They didn't have me there to hide it or anybody. So they get caught and they write up like 5 people who are under 21 for drinking. And so it's like, this jeopardizes their jobs. So the job is notified and they get in trouble and they get suspended. So Traveler got caught drinking as a minor. So he only worked for about 4 days, and then they get the notice and they kick him out of the job and they basically suspend him with notice of like trial. So they're going to put him on this little meeting. I don't know if it was trial. It's like an investigation, right? So they kept delaying the investigation every week. So for about a month, he just hangs out, makes no money. I don't know how he's surviving. He just drinks espresso. I would give him some of my food because this dude's like starving, right? And I live with him. So I felt this idea that this guy's constantly in the shits, but from what I've seen, he's a decent guy and he's nice and he's not rude to people. At least he shows it well. Yeah, he's young and he's stupid and he hangs out too late. But I gotta stick with him because he's my roommate. That's like the roommate pact. Like you have to have each other's back. So that's what I did. So I give him some food. I help him out. So they kept delaying his investigation. So basically, every night he'd just stay up till 4 because he didn't have to go to work. He'd just fuck around, drink a lot of espresso, get drunk, smoke cigarettes, this and that. And so one like I just started noticing the housing was always really like mean to him, and we were talking about it one night just in our tent by ourselves. And he's like, "Yeah, they always jump on me. Like this has always been this way." And so I asked him like straight up because this is just my first hypothesis deduction. I was like, "Well, do they have anything? Do you have anything in your past that they would know about that would cause them to kind of like single you out as somebody of like interest? Like, do they have anything on your record, like tickets or anything, or crimes? You know, like not felonies, but you know." Because sometimes when they do a background check, they can see, oh, this guy's done this, so they're going to target him. They just like don't want him there. That's what I figured was going on. I didn't understand the severity of anything, but I was like, maybe this guy has something that they just like want to bully him because they don't want him in the park, right? So when I ask him that, I'm like, do you have anything in your past that they would know about that would make them want to, you know, pick on you like that? He kind of gets quiet and he thinks about it. And I'm not accusing him of anything, so I'm not on. We're just in our room. I'm not like on the ball. I'm just like waiting. I want to be comfortable with this question, so I'm not perceiving everything perfectly. But when I say that, he looks around and he's like thinking, he's like, well, one time I got caught for having like a what is it? What are they called? Hallucinogens. So it was like mescaline, which is like some kind of peyote or something. He's like, one time I had one of that. I had that in my car when I got pulled over. So they had that's on my record, but that's about it. I was like, oh, okay. Maybe this guy's just a dick and he just doesn't like you for that because that's not much. It's not even like anything crazy. Category one or whatever they call it. So that was I remember that conversation very well because that comes into play later. But eventually, Traveler just got tired of waiting, and he's like, "I don't want to go to this investigation." That's what he told me. And he's like, "I'm just going to leave." So one morning, they just decide they're going to leave. And I remember it was the morning after a big snowstorm, so we like got snowed in, which was like a magical time because I didn't really have a lot of snow when I grew up. So it was like middle of April, but we had a big snowstorm. I had to warn everybody, "Hey, Monday it's gonna snow. Like, get your heater on, get some like blankets." Everyone's like, "What?" Nobody checks the weather. So they're I'm like, nobody gets the paper, nobody has service. So I was like, "You guys got to get ready. It's gonna snow Monday. Like, it's gonna be 20 degrees outside at least." So the morning after the snow starts clearing up, and Traveler decides I'm gonna leave because I don't want to wait for this thing. This trial. They're just gonna fire me anyway. So what do I have to wait for? So he and Josiah were both from Florida. They became fast friends. When we hang out, like a bunch of us in the parking lot and just talk, they would always kind of talk to each other about Florida and bond over that. And Josiah had kind of alluded to some elements of his past, but they left together. So that morning they're like, we're both going to leave. And, Josiah's like, screw this too. I don't like this place because he was getting in trouble a lot too with the housing people. So they were both kind of like little ruffians. So they decided they would leave together. They took Traveler's truck and went to Death Valley in late April. So um, that's like the last time I saw them. And so they just left, and I was like, well, I'm gonna probably need to get a new roommate. So I organized that. I grabbed somebody I knew, and we agreed to do that, and that's a different story. But didn't see him for about a week, and so maybe a couple weeks later, well, I didn't see them ever since then. I've never seen them again. So a couple weeks later, I'm hanging out, and we're coming back from like a party or a get together, and we're walking toward my tent, and we see a ranger. And so the first thing is my friends are leaving my tent. My new roommate and his friend are leaving the tent, and one of them is talking about alcohol. So the ranger kind of flags one of them down, my new roommate Adrian, and he's asking him, why do you have? How old are you? Why do you have alcohol? Didn't have anything on him, so he couldn't write him up. But he's like, giving a warning. And then I'm like, okay, that was stressful. So I thought that was going to be it. But then the ranger is like, I'm actually out here looking for someone. Have you seen anybody by the name of Traveler? And then his last name. And I'm like, huh? And at this point, no one called him Traveler. I'm just doing it for the story to keep his name out of it. So like if some crap happens where there's like because you'll see. But I'm for the sake of sensitivity or I don't know, classified shit. So he says, anybody seen the name, somebody with the name Traveler Blank, his last name? And I knew the last name, so I was like, oh, do you mean so and so? Like, that was my roommate, but he left like a couple weeks ago. And the guy's like, oh, really? He left? And I was like, yes. So he says, well, the reason I'm looking for him is he's a major suspect in at least two sexual assault cases. And I'm like, huh? And I guess this guy, this traveler guy, in the last two national parks he was in, it's the same story. He like got too weird with these girls, and no, he was not convicted as far as I know, but he's a heavy, he's a major suspect, the prime suspect in two different cases of sexual assault. So it's like big deal. So I'm like, what the fuck? So I didn't know any of this, and I was like in shock because I was like, what? And I pulled the ranger aside because he was there, and I'm asking him one on one. I told him, this guy, I live with this guy. I want to know what's going on, like what is happening. And this guy was pretty new, so he's pretty loose-lipped with the case details. Don't know his name. I'm not going to say it. I don't want the guy to get in trouble. But he's just telling me everything he knew. Like, oh, he's from this. Like, did you know that he went to Death Valley? I'm like, yeah. He's like, well, someone here reported him for this. And then also at one of his other parks before that. I was like, Jesus Christ. And he's like, also, we've been getting reports from some of the girls here in Yosemite that he's been involved in some strange behavior. I'm like, oh my God. So it was crazy to hear that. I'm like, I live with this guy. I slept 4 feet from this guy in the same place. I had his back, and it was like super heavy on my conscience. I'm like, how can I make this right? Because it seems like I actually helped this guy get away, not knowing. And it was just like super messed up. I couldn't even fathom it. So the ranger left, and I'm like, what can I do? So I think he gave me a phone number to call if I knew anything, because I asked for that or something, because I'm thinking, well, maybe I should help out, because this is like heinous. However you feel about policemen, this is a ranger, it's not a policeman, and second of all, this is just an awful thing, so I had to help. So these are not like the petty housing officers, these are like the real thing. So yeah, I was like, Jesus. So I kind of privately, I didn't tell people, because word spreads way too fast that I was looking into things. I just privately kind of had a notebook. I went around, I was asking people questions, and I had just bought I don't want to make jokes because this is pretty heavy, but I had a cowboy hat because I bought one because I thought it'd be fun. It looked cool. It looks dope. But anyways, I'm going around with a notebook, and I'm like asking people questions. I'm personally writing like a timeline out of events, things I remember, things that didn't add up, certain things I'm not going to talk about, but like certain events where we lost sight of somebody and they came back and then they just left the park because they had like a breakdown. And it's like, well, what happened there? It's like, well, now that you put this new piece of the puzzle in, things are starting to make sense. So you don't want to say outright, oh, this is what happened, but you can speculate. So I'm writing things in my journal. I'm not sharing anything with anybody at my level. I'm asking people questions. I'm writing stuff. And it's like I'm trying to get everybody's account. And what I learned was I started talking to some of my friends who were girls, and they knew this guy was no good, because girls talk to each other about this stuff. It's very important, especially when you're out living in tents. So it's like they knew this guy was like this. And, they didn't tell me, because like my one friend who I was really close with, she's like, well, we didn't want to tell you because we didn't know if you'd side with him or not. And I was like, that just like broke my heart, because it's like hopefully at that point they knew I was a good enough guy that I wasn't going to side with him. But it's like, you can't take that chance because we live together. They don't know what our actual friendship is like at that time, what I would describe as a friendship. So it's like, it just made me so sad to hear that, because it's like, that's so true. And it's like, you just can't do anything. So they all knew this guy was no good. He was going around like harassing this girl who told him she didn't want anything to do with him. And so, he was just like being persistent and creepy. And so all the girls pretty much knew. And so when I was going around talking to my friends who were girls, like they would all say like, yeah, we knew. And we were all like staying away from him, and he was weird. And we heard one of the people that he was harassing was someone from one of his old workplaces. She knew him there, and she heard bad stories about him there. I'm like, Jesus Christ, man. This whole time. And it's like, you don't know unless you're a girl and you perceive how these guys act. It's like a sense. But as a guy, you're like, as a guy, how are you going to perceive unless you see him with girls and you see how he acts? But he seemed normal when we were as me and him. So it's still kind of something I think about. I'm like, I just, so I had to gather all of the information and leads, and I wanted to go talk to the Rangers and tell them everything I knew, because my goal was to make sure this guy doesn't come back. I don't want this guy back here. I don't want anyone to have to see him again that's affected by him. So that's pretty much what I did. So this was all happening and converging at the same time as a big thing at work was going on. So I'm going to try to tell this story at the same time. But keep in mind, this is all happening in the span of the week. From me learning from the ranger to me writing down in my journal what's going on. The journal came in handy. So I'm taking notes. I'm not sleeping well because of this and other things. And I'm going around asking people questions. I'm not having any fun in my off time. I'm working, then I'm going back and I'm working on this. And that's what I do. And then I go to bed. I wake up in the morning, prepare this, and then I'm also working on this work stuff. So let's get into the work stuff because this is pretty juicy too. All right. So the workplace, this job could have been pretty fun. A lot of the jobs here that I learned about in Yosemite could have been pretty fun if the management just relaxed. But the problem with this place, Yosemite Valley and Aramark, is they're underpaid, understaffed, overworked, and from a logistics standpoint, they just don't have enough facilities to make the area like work for them. They just didn't have enough. They bit off more than they could chew. So everybody's like suffering. The management's overworked. They have no job protection. If they fail, they're gone. So they're acting like crazy people, trying to meet quotas, treating workers like cattle, and therefore the workers are stressed. They have no rights. They're treated like cattle. They don't get breaks. They get bullied. There's no justice. So it's all this crap going on. And this place is just like I hate to use this word because it's so cringy, but it's like a capitalist hellscape. It's just the workers have no rights to do, they can't congregate. They can't fight back. They can't speak their mind. You can get fired for nothing. Or if they don't like the shoes you're wearing, they can fire you. That's something I got told a lot, and I could see stuff like that. It's like, oh, this guy said something I don't like. I'm going to fire him for his first 60 days. So the union's not giving us any power, and no one knows their resources because our job location, the union guy's gone for 3 months. He's injured, and there's no resources. It's like hidden in the back on a billboard no one talks about. When I joined, no one talked about the union because the chefs are all management. They're not in the union. They don't want you to know. So nobody was there to brief us. We're all just like, what do we do? So the chef at the workplace pretty much had a problem with me since very early in work because my buddy Severin, I became friends with him and I could tell he was kind of anti-establishment there, which was nice to have someone like that, right? So one sec. So he Severin told me one day the chef's gonna ask you, Chef C, the head chef, he's gonna ask you, is this just a summer job for you or do you actually want a career in cooking? And he said, what I did was I made the stupid decision of saying, oh, I actually want a career in cooking. So now the chef rides me every day, makes me work super hard, singles me out, goes super hard on me just because I said that. So he's like, if the chef asks you, even if it's not true, just say it's a summer job. So for me, I was lucky because it is just a summer job. So I didn't have to lie. But it's like that day came after I was doing pretty well. I was helping him out with stuff. It seemed like he actually was pleased with something I did the first week, the last time ever. And he says, oh, so he's like eyed me out as a potential, mark. He's like, oh, is this just a summer job for you or you actually want a culinary career? It's exactly as Severin said it was going to go. And I said, oh, no, it's just a summer job. So he's like, oh, that's all he says. But in his mind, he's saying, oh, this guy's just some whatever. I don't give a shit. So he instantly marks me as someone he doesn't care about after that day. So, and secretly in the back of my mind, I know I haven't said it yet because my dad mostly said, like, don't tell people you're going to leave, that you have a different job lined up because they're just going to pile everything on you. I knew about my stable job that was happening in April at the time, and I didn't want to tell anybody because if you tell someone you're going to leave in a month, not only are they not going to like you because you're jumping ship, but they're going to, like my dad said, pile extra shit on you because they don't have to care how happy you are because you're leaving anyway. So you have nothing over them. You give away your power. So I didn't do that. But when I told them that it was just a summer job, I'm like, well, I got my stable job. So, you know, then as the time passed, down the timeline, like a month later, after they kept delaying and delaying, finally it was set in stone. In a month from now, I'm going to be going to the stables. I had organized it. So one big thing here I haven't said yet is the guy that hired me was the general manager, remember? So I actually had developed a good friendship with him, just kind of like professional. I would go see him directly when I needed something, which was super good. Like, I don't think that's something everybody had. I just got lucky because he's the one that hired me. I knew his number. I got to talk to him when I moved in. So we became pretty close to the fact that I could just go visit and see him, and he got to see me, and like he wasn't annoyed. He would actually help me out with stuff. So he was super cool. Like he did the best with what he had. He's not one of the villains in this story. I just don't want to say his name because he has a professional career, and I don't want to rope him in with my crap. This even gets more than 10 views, but you know. So, um, the thing is, I was able to talk to him, and that was something I had accidentally revealed, and I think the chef kind of knew, which threatened him, even though I wasn't the kind of person to use that against the chef to get what I wanted. It was just more like I was talking to the GM about my job that was going to be happening because he needed to be able to move me to the stables. So that's just pretty much what we talk about. Oh, your job's coming up, blah blah blah. So, anyways, all that to say, the chef did not like that. He felt threatened by that. So that's another reason he didn't like me. And so, a month away from my stable job, I decided I'm going to give him a month's notice because I'm leaving anyway. And it's funny because I just realized I directly contradicted in this story what I just told you is you don't tell them because then you have no power over them. But I had the conscience of, well, I like this place and I like my coworkers and I want to be able to tell everybody and I want to tell the chef first because I don't want to just leave them high and dry. I felt like I was a big part of the kitchen. I actually got stuff done, you know. So a month away, I go tell the chef and we meet in his office and I'm like, hey chef, and he's like, what is it? He just wants to get the meeting over with. I can already tell. He doesn't want to talk to me. It's like, Jesus, aren't you supposed to be the boss? And I'm like, well, I want you to know that a month from now I'm going to be going up to Wawona for the stable job. He's like, okay. I'm like, well, I won't be working here. He's like, anything else? Nothing to say, like, oh, congratulations, or literally any small talk. We haven't fought or anything at this point, so I don't know why he's being so, like, frank with me, but it's just like, okay. And then I'm like, that's it. He's like, okay. And then he just leaves. I'm like, what the hell is this guy's problem? He's so weird. So, guy just doesn't like me. And that day, I was taking stuff out of the oven, and we literally don't have oven gloves or oven mitts or hot gloves. So we would just grab towels, like we're 21-year-old college bachelors cooking up pizza rolls, and we would grab wet towels and grab stuff out of the oven at 500 degrees on these trays, and it would burn straight through the towels and burn my hands. And I would tell everybody, and their solution was just, oh, just get used to it. Get calluses on your hands from burning it. It's called chef hands. Just burn your nerves off. I'm like, I'm not doing that. So I go talk to the ordnance guy, the storeroom guy, super cool guy, works there. And he was like, "Oh, you can put in a request, but you have to ask the chef. Like, if you want to, you can ask for some hot gloves." So this is still the same day I told him about the job. So I go in and I talk to the chef. I'm like, "Hey, chef, like, is there any way we can get like hot gloves?" And he's like, "What for?" I'm like, "Oh, well, the oven it's super hot to use towels, and I just like I think it burns my hands." And he's like, "Well, I'm not going to do it for you because you're leaving." And he starts laughing. I'm like, "Well, okay. What about everybody else?" And he's like, "No one else wants that." I'm like, "What?" So this guy always had this problem where anytime anyone suggested, well, at least in my opinion, anytime I suggested anything to him, he would just shoot it down immediately. Even if it was extremely logical, the perfect thing to do, he'd just shoot it down because that's who he was. So I told him maybe other people want hot gloves because there's going to be other new people. I didn't say this, but there's going to be other new people later down the line. They don't all have burnt, calloused hands and they don't want to burn their hands off and drop shit everywhere. Ever think of that, dumbass? So he's like, oh, well, nobody else wants that. And I just don't even know what to say because he's being so juvenile. I'm like, okay, whatever. And then he's like, so, you know. Other than that, like another situation like that, we're learning the pizza station. I'm doing my pasta, mind you. I'm actually fucking working, and they're having a pizza party across the way in the pasta station, where they're making each other's pizzas for each other, and only the management can eat it, and they're not sharing it with any of the cooks. Just management eating pizza with themselves. Be like, this is so good, yum. I'm like, what the fuck? I'm working so hard. I'm sweating. I'm looking up, and they're having a pizza party with themselves. It's just I hate seeing stuff like that where people are when I'm working super hard, and I look up and my bosses are just like dicking around. I just lose respect. It's like you can have you can be a boss and enjoy yourself. Just don't do it in front of people that are working super hard. Like I obviously don't want the bosses to be slaving because they have their own jobs to do and stuff. But it's like stop. Like just don't do it in front of me. And when, at like rush hour, they're having a pizza party at rush hour, 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock p.m. That pissed me off. But they're making a little pizza party, and I overhear them. My friend Daniel's talking because he's like friends with the chef because the chef just likes Daniel because Daniel never makes a problem, and he's one of those guys that goes with management. But Politics Society is a really cool guy, so I never had a problem with that. But they're like talking about the pizzas, and he's making one with what is it? It's just like a chicken. Okay, so the pizza itself they're making. They're workshopping pizzas, right? They're trying to invent pizza flavors. So there's barbecue sauce layer instead of tomato sauce for the pizza, cheese, and then chicken. And I think there might be ranch, but I'm not sure. There's something else on top, like green onions or something. And so they take a bite. I didn't try it, but Daniel tries some, and they're both eating it, him and the chef. And the chef's like, "Huh, it's pretty good." And then Daniel's like, "Yeah, it's pretty good, but I think it could use like a little bit more of a kick, something with a kick, right?" And the chef's like, "I agree." So I'm right there, and I'm like, "Well, what if you use buffalo sauce, right? Buffalo, like buffalo wing sauce." And the chef, in all his wisdom, was like, "Well, I don't really think buffalo and barbecue sauce go together." And I'm just like dumbfounded. It's like such a stupid statement. I don't even know what to say. Like I don't even have an argument for it. So I wasn't ready to like steep down that low to actually have a comeback to that. So just like, huh. I'm like, this guy is supposed to be like a chef, and he doesn't understand that barbecue and buffalo are like two of the greatest sauces together ever. Like, if you've never had it, just mix them. They go perfect. Just add some spice. He's like, I don't really think they go together. I'm like, are you dumb? So he just shoots me down because it, gets him off or something. He just likes telling people no. It's his version of authority. So, you know. And so one other thing I noticed is I can't make anything substantial of this, but it's just like a observant observation. Is when I look around the kitchen, and unless you're a chef, if you're just a cook, he doesn't like you if you're a guy, or unless you're somebody that like super sucks up to him. If you're a guy, he's super curt with you. He never smiles. He never says anything funny. He doesn't joke around with you. You're not his friend. With the chefs, you're friends because they dick around all the time. It's a little fraternity of guys who don't work hard, and they joke around and shit. And the other chefs just do it to keep their job. But that's like his kind of work culture. He's just gonna dick around and then order us to do all the hard stuff, right? And then, but the other thing is, if you're a cook and you're a girl, then the jokester comes out. Here's Mr. Smiles. Here's Mr. Sweet Talking, Mr. Jokes guy, right? All of a sudden, he's Mr. Snazzy Dialogue, funny things to say. I'm observing this. I'm like, well, this is freaking weird. And I'm talking to my other coworker, the one who's the senior cook lead, who he doesn't like her, but she's a senior cook, and she's like, yeah, he's been weird with girls like that the whole time. I'm like, that's creepy. I don't like this at all. So just to say, this is not a reputable guy. This is not somebody I like on many different levels. I do not appreciate him as a person. So, whatever. The next big thing that happened was the big climax, kind of, not even the climax, but the big, everything came to a head, which was this event called Pasta Night at work. As I've told you, I used to be the guy that was the pasta station dude. When Daniel and I were there, we'd work together. If Daniel was gone, I'd do it myself, maybe have someone help me. But today it was me by myself. Daniel wasn't there, and there was going to be something called Pasta Night. And I didn't know what Pasta Night was. Sometimes we'd have random crap, like kids would come, so we'd make extra food for them, right? So no one told me what the hell Pasta Night was, and I was working on the pasta station, and no one thought it'd be a good idea to tell the pasta guy that it's Pasta Night. And lo and behold, I love saying that. It's 4 o'clock, going on 4:30. We open for dinner at 5, and then someone brings up to me, blah 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 blah, pasta night, and I'm like, what is pasta night? And they're like, oh, that's the night where we make 6 extra trays of meatballs and 10 extra trays of pasta and put out hundreds of bowls of pasta for all these kids to eat. And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? I'm the pasta guy. No one told me that. I have 20 minutes or so to do all this. So I start freaking out, and I'm just going a mile. I almost said a mile a minute, whatever. A mile an hour. I don't know, mile a minute, whatever. I'm going fast as hell. I'm loading up the meatballs, which take a long time. You have to run them through the oven twice. I'm loading up the pasta. I'm going insane. I'm going fast, 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 fast. I have 2 seconds of downtime, so I run over to the main kitchen. I'm like, can I get some help? I need help with pasta night. That's all I could think to do because there's like 10 people in there. Nobody comes over to help. They have their own stuff to do. And so I'm working, working, working. I'm in my own head. I'm anxious. I'm like trying to get it all going. And the head chef himself comes by. He walks over to the pasta station. He doesn't start helping. He just stands there. He's like, what's going on? I'm like, it's pasta night. I got to get shit together. Like, I got to go. And then he starts getting anxious because he sees me, but he's not doing anything helpful. He's just getting angry because he's anxious. It's like, sorry, we're trying to work. And I'm working, working, working. He's like, well, what do you need help with? And I'm like, well, I just need to be able to make the pasta. He's like what? What do you need help with? And he keeps saying it, and he's getting more and more frustrated, and he's putting me in this situation, right, where I have to like give him orders. And I would never do that because he's my boss. I'm not going to order my boss around like, help me right now. I would say, oh, if you could please, blah, blah, blah. But I don't even want to do that. I don't want to even ask him for anything because he's my boss. So it's like, if he wants to elect to help himself, he can, but I have to do my own thing. If he wants to bring someone to help me, I can ask them for help because they're my coworker. But he's my boss. So I would never be like, help me with pasta. And then so he just keeps getting more and more frustrated. And I was like, I don't know, like I need help. Like, can I get someone, if I could have extra hands, that's what I said. If I can get some extra hands, that'd be great. And he's like, and then he just blows up and he's like, well, what the fuck? Why are you so fucking mad? Like, this is word for word what he's saying to me. He's yelling at me, swearing when I wasn't swearing at him. He's like, stop getting so fucking mad. Just shut up and do your fucking job. And I'm like, what the hell? Like, why are you yelling at me? And he just gets all puffed up and mad. And I'm like, I don't know what pasta night is. I have to make like 6 trays. Nobody told me what's going on. And he's just like, just do your fucking job. It's not a big fucking deal. Just make pasta. I'm like, what? I don't say anything. And I try to just walk away because it's like, this is too much for me. I just need to go take a breather. The chef just swore at me for no reason. He doesn't usually do that. It's not that kind of work environment. I'm like, I can't be talked to like this. So I'm leaving. And as I'm leaving, he storms off too. And he starts just telling people what to do, or he starts telling me what to do because he's in one of his moods. He's like, and turn your music down and make more meatballs and make this. And then he's like, sees one of the girls from the front, and he's always yelling at the girls from the front. So he sees one of the girls from the front, And he's like, Sadie. And she's like, what? He's like, never mind. But he's about to yell at her too. I'm like, what is this guy's problem? So he just storms off. Great help, by the way. I asked for help. This guy comes back and yells at me and leaves. That's great. Could have just sent someone over to help me set up, but no. Anyways, Jesus Christ. So he goes and does that. And I go and talk to my friend who's there, the senior cook. And she's like, wow. Like, I tell her what happened. She's like, Jesus, like, that's awful. Like, you should just go talk to the general manager right now. So just go talk to him right now and get it settled. And I'm like, that's a good idea. I can do that. She's like, yeah, just take a break and I'll cover you, right? So I leave the building and I go talk to the general manager. I go get to see him. I'm still in my dirty work clothes, but I brush them off as best as I can, take the shirt off and all that. And I talk to him and I tell him most of the stuff you've heard already. I told him about the oven mitts, how he's been treating me different since I told him about the stable job, how he doesn't listen to me, he shuts down my ideas. The girl thing, which was big, but I was pissed. So I told him about the girls, how a guy acts different with girls, and how he just cussed me out for no reason and just yelled at me. It's a big deal because it's like you can't do that, especially when I didn't do anything. It's like you can't just scream at a worker and cuss them out for no reason. So I'm saying, hey, this guy's a grade A asshole. So I talk to the GM and I leave and I decide I'm going to take my lunch. So I come back and I say, I'm going to take my lunch because I deserved it. It's been like 5-6 hours since I clocked in. I was like, I need lunch. So my friend covers me. I always make sure I'm covered and I just go. And as I'm on lunch, I guess what the timeline was, the chef had gone looking for me and couldn't see me because now he realizes he might be in some shit and he wants to try to figure out what's going on. But I just forgot a big part of the story, but I'll tell you after this. So I'm on lunch, right? And I get a call from a number I don't recognize, and I answer. I'm like, hello? And then this lady is like, hello, this is such and such. I'm the front of house manager for the kitchen, and I've heard of her name, but I never talked to her. I'm like, hi, why are you calling? And she's like, well, we just got a report that you might have just, what was it? Abandoned your workplace? I was like, no, I'm on lunch. She's like, oh. She's like, well, is there anything I can help you with? Like, is something wrong? And I'm like, who is this person? Why is she being like this? And I'm like, in my head, I'm envisioning her in the chef's office calling me, and I'm on speakerphone, and they're trying to get me to talk about what's wrong. And maybe they think that I did go talk to the GM, and they want to know what I said. They're trying to get the information out of me, right? So I'm like, I'm gonna be frank. Like, I don't really know you that well. I don't want to tell you. So I'm just on lunch, and I'll be back. And she's like, oh, okay. Well, if there's anything you could talk to me, I'm like, no, I don't really want to. I don't know you. And from what I've heard, she's in on all this too. She's in on the politics. She's like, just like the rest of them, she'll screw you over. So that was a big thing. So to fully understand why I think the chef got so mad at me there, on top of all the compounded stuff of him just having personality problems, the day before that, like let's say pasta day was a Wednesday, right? It was May the 4th because, hey, Force Day. May 5th was Cinco de Mayo. So that's a Thursday that I had off because Tuesday, so Thursday, Wednesday, Tuesday, the day before pasta night, I come into work, I see my work schedule, and I look, and I'm looking at both pages, and I count out the days, and I usually work 5 days, 40 hours, pretty standard, right? I'm counting the days, and this guy had scheduled me for 6 days in a row, which nobody does unless you want to. So I'm like, that's weird, but he probably doesn't care. I mean, they didn't even have my last name capitalized for a month till I had to ask him to capitalize my last name. He doesn't give a shit about me. So I look at that and I'm like, well, that's weird. So I'm like, what should I do? So I go talk to my best friend, the shift lead or the lead cook, the senior cook. And she says, well, they can't make you do that because frankly, you have seniority. You've been here a really long time. We just got a bunch of new workers. We have like 10 new workers since I showed up. And there's no way you're going to be working 6 while they're not. So you should go talk to the chef and ask him to give you 5 days or change your scheduling. And I was like, perfect. That sounds great, right? So my mistake is I go ask the chef and he says, well, talk to me. Or he's like, he does a standard like, oh, come back to me later. Just like basically fuck off. I don't want to talk to you. That's the first thing he says. And then later I see he's alone in pasta station all the way on the other end of the kitchen where there's nobody for a witness. And I go talk to him alone. That was my mistake. You got to have somebody with you because you're going to hear what happens. So this is exactly how the conversation went down. It's burned in my brain because I had to remember it. I had to memorize it for later. I go talk to him in the pasta station. I say, hey, chef. And he's like, what's up? And he's like, you know how I asked you about the scheduling thing? He's like, yeah, what is it? Once again, he's doing that technique of just saying the exact minimum amount of words to just end the conversation because I guess he just loathes talking to me, right? And I'm like, I tell him, well, I noticed on the schedule I'm scheduled for 6 days in a row. I let it hang. And he says, yeah, what about it? I'm like, well, I don't really think I should be working 6 days in a row. I didn't ask for overtime, and I have seniority, so I don't need to be working six. And he doesn't say anything. He just says like, okay, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? I'm like, well, I think it'd be a good idea if I could pick one of those days to take off, and then I wouldn't be working 6 days in a row. How does that sound? He's like, okay, what day do you want? What day do you want? He's just trying to get it going. It's like he's not even having the thought. He's just saying. I'm like, well, how about Thursday the 5th? I'll take Cinco de Mayo off. He's like, okay, good. I'm like, okay, great. I'm going to go mark it on the schedule. So I go into his office, which you're allowed to do. Someone told me I need to do this. I think the lead cook said, go into his office, mark it off, and then go into the board where everyone looks and mark it off. So that way he knows, and all the workers know. Everybody knows. And then I went around telling everybody, because I didn't want people to get screwed over. I wanted to let them know, hey, the schedule's changing. Taking Thursday off so everybody can move the parts around. Told the other chefs, told my cooks, right? Taking Thursday off. Wednesday happens, pasta night, the big yelling fiasco, right? Thursday, I don't go to work. I don't, they don't call me. That's the big thing. The morning of my shift, or let's say I go in at 1 o'clock, 1:30, 1:40, they don't call me, right? So that means to me, everything's fine. I'm not supposed to be there and I'm not. Nobody's calling me, right? That's what they do at work when you don't show up. They call you, they ask what's up, tell them you're not coming in, they mark you off for a no-call, no-show, right? But I sanctioned it, so they didn't call me. That makes sense in my head. But anyways, Thursday goes by. I think I had Friday off too. But Thursday, Cinco de Mayo. So they had this cool thing at the rec center where they sold these tacos. You come and build your own tacos, like Chipotle style. I know. And but they were really good. Those ones were good. They had birria and El Pastor, which are my favorite. So super great tacos. I got to go there. And of course, who's there? The entire gang of all my bosses are there when they're supposed to be scheduled to work, but they're just screwing off, taking 2 hours off to go eat tacos. God knows we don't need to serve anybody. The kitchen's open, by the way. They're just there. So they see me, and it's awkward because the chef just yelled at me Wednesday, so I don't want to talk to him. And that one lady called me that I don't know, and I felt like she was trying to get information out of me, so I don't trust them. So they all see me there, and they're all in a big circle, all my chefs and bosses. And I mean, if you were there and you went to some random party and you saw all your bosses, would you want to go talk to them? Like, I don't care if they're kind of cool. Like, you just want to be on your day off. You don't want to think about work, and you have other people to talk to. I'm like, eh. So I grab the food, and I beeline in front of them diagonally. I just go diagonal of the circle they're at. I don't avoid them. I look at them, and I'm just like, whatever. I'm going to eat my food. I'm here with my friends. We're going to go hang out. So I go hang out. I go talk with Severin. We go do the couch. And I do it a lot better, and we say our goodbyes because he's leaving soon. He's like, I'm done with this place. I'm actually have a better job lined up. Super cool. And then I come back. Let's say Saturday is my first day back, or maybe it's Friday. And I come back, and immediately I noticed the other chefs that I was cool with, like Chef Jay. We had that big night where we fended off the hordes. He's just giving me the cold shoulder. He doesn't smile. He's not laughing with me. He's not cool with me. He's just like, oh, hey, like, what's up? And then I'm like, okay, what's going on? And I noticed something's up because he screamed at me, and I talked to the manager, so things are going to be set in motion, right, with the head chef. So I just got the news that day, the shop steward, which is our union representative, just came back for his first day of work after being injured for 3 months. I'm like, well, what a good lucky break. I can talk to this guy and actually figure out what I should do. So I told him about the situation because I figured they're going to try to do something about it. But I told him the situation about the scheduling and how I got verbal approval, and that's the main thing he said was, well, you had verbal approval, so you're okay. And the big thing I want to know is this going to affect my actual job that I want, the stable job? And he's like, well, it could, because they could just fire you, and then you're not an employee here. So I could potentially lose my job. But anyways, that's not yet. But that's if things go really bad, right? Things won't go that bad. So I'm talking to him for most of the time, talking to the Jamaicans, telling them what happened. And then one of my coworkers tells me that yesterday, which was Thursday, the chef was going around work and telling everyone that I marked myself off the schedule without asking and just didn't show up. And he's like freaking out. He's like throwing things. I'm not making this up, but he was like flipping out. And I'm like, what's going on with this guy? So it's like we literally spoke to each other. And so I'm hearing that. And then as I'm listening to that, the Chef Jay comes, second in command, and he's like, the chef wants to talk to you in his office, which no one ever says. So I'm like, what? I'm like, oh my God. So I'm going in, and I've heard all these stories. I've heard all these stories about they just fire you for whatever reason they want. You can get fired. You can lose your job. They don't even like you. So I'm on the defense. I'm getting like steeled up. I'm ready to defend myself. And I go into the office, and I sit down, and it's me, it's the head chef, and that front of house lady. And I'm sitting there. They said, hello. The lady's nice. She'll wear a smile. The chef doesn't say anything. He's just pouting like a little kid, having her do all the talking for him. She's like, you know why we called you in here? I'm like, no. And she's like, we're giving you what's called a 48-hour notice. So the first thing I hear when I hear 48-hour notice is I'm going to be fired and I have 48 hours to leave, right? Like you have 48 hours to evacuate the premises, like that kind of shit. But it's not that. She's like, do you know what that is? I'm like, no. It's like, this means you're under investigation, which who says it like that? Like I'm a criminal. You're under investigation and you have 48 hours to get a union representative to help you, to represent you in a meeting or the investigation where we're going to talk about what you did. And they won't tell me what I did. Like they're not saying it. And I'm like, well, what did I do? Like, what is this for? And she's like, I don't really know if we can say. I'm like, you can tell me. Like, you're supposed to, I need to know what this is about. And she's like, well, this all I can say is it has to do with attendance. I'm like, attendance? So the attendance policy in the books is if you do a no call no show, which I've never done, I called out once, which is a call out. So 2 call outs counts for like a no call, or maybe it's 3, right? The first time you get a no call no show, you get a warning. The second time you get it's like I forget the first infraction, but it's like 2 or 3 you're fired, right? You get 2 or 3 every 6 months. I haven't done a single one. So I'm like, what is this about? Why would it be an investigation for attendance? So it's usually pretty cut and dry when, so I'm like, what the hell? So I think it has to be the Cinco de Mayo thing. Like, what is this about? So they said you have 48 hours to find a shop steward and you need to be ready for a meeting. So I'm like, what the fuck? So I'm like, I'm going, and I immediately go back to the union rep who had just come back for that first day, and I start telling him exactly what they told me. He's like, oh wow. And he's like, well, tell me what happened, because usually attendance is pretty normal. Either blah blah, like it's just like tardiness or whatever. And I tell him the situation, and he's like, that is pretty weird. And he's like, well, you're gonna need a good shop steward. And he's like, I could represent you. And the poor guy, from what I've heard, he's really knowledgeable, but he's not very good in meetings. He like freezes up. He doesn't really help you. I've heard this one guy is super good, and I was like, and I tell him kind of polite, like, I'm like, well, I've actually already been emailing this one guy, so I'd rather go with him. He's like, oh, that guy's really good. He's my neighbor. Like, I can get you his number, call him, do this, you can get a hold of him. I'm like, oh, thank God. So I think I worked the rest of the day, but you know how these stories go. You really don't remember the rest of the day at work because all day you're just thinking about what do you got to do. So they're making me work, and at the same time, I got to fight for my life. So I get off work and I call the number and the guy doesn't answer. I leave a couple messages because it's important to me. I could lose my job and my other job. So I'm like spam calling this guy, and then I can't sleep and I can't think. So at lunch that day, I knew that was going to there was going to be an investigation. So I start taking to my journal and I'm writing down the conversation. I'm writing down exactly what happened. I'm writing down all this dirt on him and stuff that I've collected. So that morning I wake up and I go to the rec center where they have Wi-Fi, and I type up. I remember what I used. I think I used my phone to type up this whole thing, and I printed it out with their printer. I asked to use the printer for the nice lady at the desk, and I printed up this like dossier, this report of like the conversation word for word that we had, which is a great idea. If you ever get into shit like this at work, type it up, make a record of what was said. They'll bring it to the meeting, and you can ask them if they remember this conversation. And it's a really powerful thing to bring. So I'm glad I did that because I wrote it down. I think my mom had that advice because I called her and talked to my parents. My mom's in the union for like her work, and she knows exactly how to deal with this stuff. She's like, keep a record, write it down. It's really powerful in these meetings, and it was. So I wrote it down, and I typed it all out. And I didn't know when the meeting was going to be. I'm like, it could be any time, so I got to do this soon. So I call the shop steward. The shop steward finally calls me right that morning. It's only been like less than 12 hours. And he's like, hey. I'm like, what's up? And he's like, all I can tell you as your shop steward is the meeting is going to be today at 12. I'm like, huh? And he's like, yeah, I'm going to meet you there, and I can't talk to you about it until I'm there, but just know that. I'm like, oh. I'm like, okay. I'm like, well, can I meet you before the meeting? Because it seems like this guy's just trying to get it done, but I've heard he's really good, so maybe he just has a lot on his plate. But he's like, okay, yeah. So I was like, let me meet you early and talk to you about what's going on. He thinks it's real, dime a dozen case of attendance. So that day, thank God I typed all that out and I got ahead of the ball, or got on the ball. I'm like going and figuring things out. Let's see. Maybe it was the next day. For the sake of the story, let's say it's the next day. So my mind's totally all over the place. Every night I'm like not sleeping. It's like a battle's coming up. I feel like a general that's about to go to battle. Yeah, I can't talk about anything until we're sitting at the meeting for your own defense. I know. It's like what? Like it's like a public attorney or something. So anyways, let's say for the sake of the story, because I haven't talked about this, but my nights were crazy. I'm sleepless. It feels like I'm about to go to battle and I have to be ready. So like one of the nights, I remember I'm just not having fun. All of my off time, like I was saying earlier, I'm not doing anything recreational. I'm focusing on talking to the Rangers about my old roommate, gathering information on that, and then in my other time, trying to gather information for my work, figure out what to do, talk to shop stewards. There's an ex shop steward, a union rep I could talk to about what's going to happen, figure out the system, all in the span of like 24 hours. And so one night I just can't sleep. My friend wants to hang out. My roommate, my poor roommate, he's like, "Hey, do you want to do something?" I'm like, "I can't right now." I'm real curt with him. I don't always, but I felt bad in the moment. I was like, but I just can't fuck around. I can't do like kid shit. I have to actually sit down and figure this out for my well being. So I literally go and I'm like just sitting in the rec center, which is closed because it's like 12 a.m. And this is like a scene from a movie I'll never forget. I'm sitting in the middle bench. Think of like a U/V shaped pavement, three segments. So kind of like a angled segment, flat segment, angled segment, like a U shape of pavements. And there's a bench on each segment, right? So I'm in the middle one, and on my two wings are these angled segments with two other benches, right? I'm sitting in the middle. I got my cowboy hat on. I'm jotting down things in my journal that are going to be useful that I'm going to type up for the next morning. And I'm getting everything together for all these side quests I have converging at once. And so my friends, I have the Jamaicans on one, or I have two of my friends, the Jamaicans on the left side, who are like my posse at this point. And I have two of my other friends, the Jamaicans, on my right side. And I literally feel like a mob boss or something, or like some kind of guy that's sitting in the middle, insulated, protected by my friends, and I'm jotting things down, super focused, just not even paying attention. But they're on both sides. We're like, it's like our little area. And one of them's over on the bench talking, who's like my good friend. And then my friend Mario, who I'd been training, is like, just chill out, Grant. Like, don't think too much. It gets to your head. Like, you're gonna lose all your hair. Don't think too much. I was like, yeah, but I need to think. And I'll be transparent here. Like, before I went to Yosemite, I think I like fucked around, tried some cigarettes, didn't like it for my UPS job, but like I really needed to think. And I remember that whenever I did it, it helped me think a lot. So this part of my life, I actually got back into smoking because of this, because I was just so stressed and I needed to think. And they did help me think, but don't do it. Nasty habit. I've kicked it by now. I haven't smoked in months, like ever since Yosemite, pretty much. But that was I don't want to say it. I mean, I'm not talking to kids, but it did help me think. So it's a good mental stimulant. So just have a cigar instead next time. Don't do cigarettes. But yeah, that helped me focus, and that's why I was staying up so late and jotting everything down. It helped me get that stuff done better than fucking Adderall. But I won't do it again. I don't do that kind of stuff. But so I was there smoking a cigarette, chilling, jotting things down in the journal, and it's like, yeah, pretty crazy. That's like a very surreal moment of my life. It's like a painting, but I was getting it down, and he told me not to think too much. But I was like, I have to. They knew what was going on. I had filled everybody in there. Like, that's fucked up. I was kind of trying to warn the Jamaican guys because they were new. But took a bunch of records. The morning comes, I type it up, and I get there. The guy calls me and says, like I was saying earlier, can't talk until then. And I was like, well, let's meet early. So I'm there. The meeting's at like 12. He shows up at 11:30 and calls me. I pull my phone out. The whole thing's on vibrate the whole day. I'm ready. I'm ready. He's like, I'm here. I'm like, okay, I'm coming out there. So I don't even ask anybody. Maybe I tell the chef, I'm like, oh, my shop steward's here. And they don't know what to do. They're just like, oh, okay. Like, they can't interfere because it's union stuff. They don't really know what to do. So I go meet this guy. This guy's name is Jeff. He might still be there. Longtime guy. Everybody told me he's like a mad dog in the meetings. You need him because he's like the best guy to get for meetings, like investigations. He just gets on them. He's frank with them. He's real, up to speed on the rules and codes. So he's coming at this is just a routine thing. This kid's getting dinged for attendance. Attendance is real simple. So I start talking to him, and the layers start peeling off, and he's realizing I'm not some dumbass that it just didn't show up to work and wants to whine about it, right? And so he's hearing my story, and like at first he's like, well, attendance is pretty black and white. Either you showed up or you didn't. So I can't imagine how this is like a different case than that. And I'm like, well, you better listen to my case. And I don't know if you were here, Luke, for the whole story, so I'll sum it up. But the chef basically, he scheduled me for 6 days in a row because I had precedent that he didn't like me. As I'm telling okay, you've been here the good 15. So I tell the guy, like, this guy scheduled me for 6 days. I talk to him directly, the chef, and I'm like, hey, can we just split the week? And he gives me verbal permission in person. But straight to my face, yeah, pick a day, take it off, mark it off. You won't show up, it's fine. He says go. So I do it. And then I do it, and the day I'm not there, the chef's flipping out, screaming, throwing shit everywhere, telling everyone I didn't do it. And now all of my friends and the chefs that I made a good good relationship with, besides the head chef, the side chefs, the sous chefs, They don't like me anymore. They're giving me the cold shoulder. They're pissed off at me, right? I'm like, what happened? Like, what do they think happened? So he must have told them some twisted story. But I tell the shop steward exactly what happened, and that's what happened. God's truth. And he's like, huh. He's like, yeah, that's definitely not very black and white. And he's like, well, it sounds like your management doesn't know the union rules because clear as day, a verbal permission is just as good as written permission. And if you had verbal permission to take the day off and you did, you're not in the wrong at all. And it's like, that's exactly what I need to hear. So for the first time, I have somebody with power that's on my team that can actually help me. And this guy's like 2 inches taller than me. He's like 6'5". He's like, let's go. We're going to walk in there. So we're walking up to the kitchen, and it feels like I'm walking up there with like my dad or something. Excuse me, my dad or something. He's like walking in there. We're just like sauntering into the kitchen. We bust through the doors, got like sunglasses on and shit. Everyone's like, what's going on? I'm like, I got my fucking meeting right now. That's right. So we burst through, and he's like, hey, is this where the meeting's happening? Like in the office? And they're like, okay. We're like, yeah, it's here. So we sit down for the meeting, and the guy's real comfortable, and he's like, oh, the front of house manager, the lady that tried to like get information out of me, tried to Gestapo me or some shit. He's like, oh, how you doing, so and so? Hope you're staying out of trouble this time. So I've heard she's trouble, that she bounced from job to job and she can never keep her job because she's always getting involved in something and causing trouble. So I'm just like, this guy's badass. He's saying what I wish I could say. And he can say it because in meetings, the shop stewards are on the level of management. He told me I can say anything I want to these guys and I'm not going to get disciplined. So it's like, it's just a real, and I can't, me, myself, I can't, but he can. So that's why you need them. So I guarantee you, if I had gone into this meeting without him, I would have just been fired on the spot. Just fired. Because I got him and I got somebody to actually back me up, I had a shot. So I was ready. I did the work and we're in the meeting. So I'm super like on the ball, focused as hell, ready for anything. So the way it goes down is I showed him the paper that I typed out beforehand. He read the conversation. He said, okay. He folds it up. He takes it with him. So we come in. Still don't know specifically what this meeting's about. So I'm actually getting to hear it for the first time at the meeting, which is just so fucked up. Imagine you go to court and you don't know what you're in trouble for until the day of. It's so stilted and it's so skewed in their favor because you can't build a defense if you don't know what the fuck you did. They just said it's attendance. That's all they could give me. And I had to draw that out of them too. But that aside, we're in there and the union rep is like, okay, what are we here for? And they said, well, we're here because regarding attendance, because we believe Grant no call, no show to work. So the fact they're opening an investigation on this already, the grounds of it, is ludicrous because you need at least 3 for it to be a discipline. So I don't know what this was going to be, but they could have fired me for this because they're making an official movement, right? So I'm in there and they're saying, well, we know that he came in and he marked himself off the schedule and didn't show up on Thursday when he was scheduled to work. And then and that's the first thing they led with. So that was their first bullet point, right? And so this was like the movies. I got to do the 2 things in movies that they do when you got a lawyer with you, right? What are the 2 things you think of? Someone's in a meeting with the lawyer, like Social Network or some Better Call Saul shit. You lean over, the lawyer says something in your ear, you ask him a question. It's like real secretive. They can't hear you, right? I got to do that. So they would say stuff and I was like, should I speak on that? And he's like, no, don't even say anything. Just shit like that. And the other thing that I liked that I got to do was they would ask me a question and I would just look at the shop steward and he would nod his head no or shake his head no, and I just wouldn't answer it. He's like, you don't have to answer that. That's the body language. So that was cool. But I was really stressed in the time being, but looking back, that was super funny. But anyways, in the meeting, they set that up. They said, oh, it's about attendance. He didn't show up. And then I didn't even talk because the shop steward said, don't talk unless I tell you it's okay to talk because the less you talk, the better. And don't get mad at them in there. I was like, okay, cool. I was mad, but I wasn't going to get mad because I knew how these things went. So he starts saying, well, Grant here typed up this written report of the conversation you had, and I'm going to read it to you. And they're like looking at each other, the 2 bosses. They're like, huh? And so they're like, according to Grant, and they have the date and everything because I wrote down the fucking dates. It's like Wednesday the 4th at 12:15 p.m. He talked to Chef C in the pasta station. At this time, and this conversation happened. So he reads it off like it's some fucking official military report, and he's like, the way I wrote it was, just like I said, Chef Chris, I have 6 days in a row. Can I get rid of one of the days of work, take it off? Yes. Okay, I will. Yes. Verbal confirmation. He reads it out loud, and then he asks the chef, do you remember having this conversation? And the chef, that ass, looks at us and says, no, I don't remember having that conversation. And we're thinking, and the shop steward is saying, well, I talked to Grant and he seems to think it happened. And just from my impression of him, he does not seem like a liar. So I don't know why he would lie about this. Do you know what this is about? And the chef doesn't have anything to say. So here's the convergence, right? Either the chef's lying and he's being, tricky and he's being evil, or he literally just doesn't remember, which I don't like either because he's putting my career on the line. So either way, screw him. But his response is so dumb. It's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. He's like, well, I don't remember it, and I know it didn't happen because I keep a journal. So anytime I have conversations like this, I write it down in my journal. And I didn't write this conversation down in my journal, so it obviously didn't happen. And the shop steward is like so dumbfounded. He's like, what? He's like, well, anyways, Grant seems to think it happened, and frankly, I believe him. And he got verbal confirmation, and the union contract says if you get verbal confirmation, you're allowed to take the day off. So is there anything else? Because this doesn't hold up. This person is a preschooler. I know, what the fuck? So, and it was my boss. So he's like, that doesn't hold up. He's like, is there anything else you have? And they said, well, our next point is, so stupid. On Friday, Cinco de Mayo, we saw Grant when he wasn't at work, and he went and got tacos, and he saw us and he avoided us. So they're making it seem like I got my food and I ran away from them. And we thought, the way she said it was, and we thought that was kind of a red flag. I'm like, what the fuck are you saying? So, they are in cahoots, the front of house manager and my chef, because I just remembered the night that I went and talked to the GM and came back, and they had called me and tried to Gestapo the information out of me that night. They're in cahoots because I came back that day and the rest of that shift was odd. It was eerie. When I was telling my coworker, the senior cook, what had happened and what I had said to the GM, she was there with me and we were talking back in the pasta station by herself. It's a one-way entrance. So we're talking, and this dumbass, the chef, the head chef, Chef C, tries to walk in and act all covert like he's not listening to us, but he wants to know exactly what I'm saying. He knows he's in hot water, and he's worried. And that's why he had that lady call me and try to get information out of me so they could share with each other. All this bullshit. I'm just here to cook food, dude. I make food for people. I was making food, but they want to play preschool, politics. But anyways, this guy walks back to the pasta station. I can see him clearly in my line of vision because I'm looking at her toward the entrance. And he's walking in, and this dumbass, he walks to this little alcove where we keep the fridge. There's nothing in there. There's nothing to be done there. He walks to this little alcove. He leans over and leans his head down like he's listening in, and it's completely in clear sight that he's leaning his head down toward me to peek his head to listen. And I stop talking, and I look up, and I'm like, hey, chef, do you need anything? Like, just real nice, but I'm obviously like, what the fuck are you doing here? I'm like, do you need anything, chef? He's like, oh no, I'm just grabbing these boxes. And he just like looks and grabs random boxes and like picks them up and grabs them like he's a fucking cartoon character, like Bugs Bunny trying to infiltrate. And he grabs the cardboard box and walks away. And I'm like, what the fuck? And me and my friend are just both like, are this guy serious? So we just move further down into the sanctum and have an even quieter conversation. But he's trying to monitor me and he's trying to get information to use against me. And he's like trying to do all this crap. And I'm like, what's going on, man? What is this Interpol job? But anyways, back to the meeting. They say, oh, we think it's a red flag that, Grant got tacos and he avoided us. And I'm like, huh? And then I just that's the moment where I look at them. I don't say anything. I just look at my shop steward. I look over to him and he just nods his head. I just don't say anything. And he's like, we don't see the relevancy of that. Is that really everything you have? And they're like, well, yes, that's everything we have, but we will be keeping this investigation open. And I'm like, what the fuck? So he's like, well, good day. If anything else happens, notify me. I'll represent you again. And then I just kind of get up and leave. I don't say, oh no. They say, my shop steward is talking and he's like, is there anything else you want to say before we leave? He's like, Grant, do you want to say anything? And this was my closing statement. Some real badass shit. But I was like, I looked at the chef because he wasn't talking the whole time. He's having the girl talk for him the whole time. Spineless man. And I'm looking at him and I'm like, look, chef, I'm not insubordinate. I'm very upfront. You asked me to do something and I do it. That day, when I talked to you, I came to you as a question. I said, can I take the day off? That meant that I was ready for you to say no. If you had said no that day, I would have done 6 days in a row because that's what you said. But you told me yes. I'm not insubordinate. I'm not deceptive. I'm not a liar. That's what happened and that's how it is. So I don't understand how this got messed up, but that's the way it was. And that's all I said and then I left. But this guy doesn't care. He doesn't live in a world of honor or truth. It's all in his head. He's just got some screwed up things in his head where he wants to inflict pain on people or whatever the hell. So done with him. So you think that's it, right? So I go debrief with my shop steward and he's like, that was something. He's like, these people need to be trained because this is not how the union works. They clearly don't know what the hell they're talking about. He's like, that was like, he basically just said that was bullshit. He's like, got a sailor's, vocabulary. He's like, that was a bunch of bullshit. I was like, oh, great. And he's like, what you should do is you should go talk to my friend. She's the manager of HR. She could be a really good help to you. You should go talk to her, tell her what happened here, put in a request and all that stuff. And get it filed because this is pretty big that they're doing this. I was like, oh, cool, more stuff, but whatever. I had the next day off or something. So literally, and then he said, and what was that crap about the taco stand? He's like, you were off work. And he was like, I was like, I don't care if you were drunk and doing cartwheels. If you're not on your job, it doesn't matter what the fuck you were doing. Like, that was so stupid. And I was like, yeah, that was pretty stupid. Competent people are everyday fucking heroes when dealing with snakes. I know. I'm so glad I had someone with the authority because I could try to done it my own and I would have done it in a similar way, but I had no authority to do anything. You have to be somebody with a badge or a title to do anything in these kinds of environments, and it's their worst nightmare that I got one. They wanted me to go with the helpful guy that worked there who was gone for 3 months because they know they kept him around because he's no good in meetings and they can win every time. They know how to push his buttons, right? That's how they get what they want. But I got some outside guy that works in a different part of the park that I brought in because he's friends with the guy here. I really worked it and I got him and he just blew him out of the park. So, anyways, you're thinking, okay, that's pretty crazy. That's probably the end of it, right? No. So, about a week before all this, I just was like, I'm, living my life. I'm young. I'm only gonna get older. One of the trendy things through like TikTok or whatever and COVID and stuff was painting their nails black, right? It was a cool look. I was always pretty into grunge. I wore a lot of black clothes. I wore jewelry at the time, like rings and shit. I was into like kind of grungy style at the time. And my friend was a really good friend. She did nails, and she was like, I voiced to her at work, oh, I've always thought about painting my nails. She's like, well, what would you do? I was like, probably black, just to try it out. And she's like, oh, that's cool. She's like, well, if you ever want to do it, just let me know. So I was like, oh yeah, let's do it. Like, why not? I live here. It's not against the dress code to have painted nails because I had seen her, the lady does nails, in the similar job as me, handling food with nails every day. So I'm like, it's obviously not disallowed, right? So I got them painted on my days off. And then when I came in that one day and they gave me the notice of the meeting, so this was a couple days back from what we were talking about, they said, this is a 48-hour notice. When I was leaving the 48-hour notice meeting, the lady or the chef said, by the way, your nails, that's a health code violation. And I'm like, huh? And then the front of house lady was like, no, he can wear gloves as long as he's wearing gloves, which I wear 24/7. I don't touch food without gloves ever for my training. She's like, as long as he's wearing gloves, it's fine. And that's how we settled it. Never was brought up again until the day I come back from work after this meeting where I won the meeting, right? The chef just can't handle that I won the meeting. I just blew him up, showed him how stupid he was. He couldn't handle it. So I come back, let's just say it was a Monday, and the first thing they flag me down. I'm the man because I just won the meeting. I'm here, I'm stomping all over him, do my victory lap. After that meeting, I had like a victory lap. They put me on prep alone because the guy's so petty, he doesn't want to see me. So he put me alone in the giant sanctum of the kitchen because we just switched to pizza. So totally top to bottom redoing of the kitchen. We're just totally pizza now. So I'm on my own in this giant sanctum of the kitchen where it's normally 20 people there. It's just me. I'm doughing the pizza, rolling it up, putting sauce on it and cheese and traying it and moving it over to the 10 other people that are in the kitchen, working like in the hot kitchen, all like cramped in. I'm alone. I'm in this giant sanctum because the chef doesn't want to see me. So I'm just blasting like Frank Sinatra, I Did It My Way was my big song because that's how I felt. I did it my way. I fucking won. I beat these guys. I'm just singing along, having the happiest day of work ever because, like, screw these guys. They lost. Get bodied. You guys suck. So just chilling. And then I go off and I have a weekend and I come back on Monday and they immediately flag me down. They bring me into the office. And this time it's just me, the general manager, and the chef. And the general manager is holding this giant, archaic Harry Potter fucking book I've never seen in my life that says, like, employee codes and guidelines. I'm like, what? And the chef's there. And immediately the first thing he says when I walk in is, last time I talked to you, I told you your nails were a health code violation. I told you to get rid of them before your next shift. He never said any of that to me. And I'm on the ball because I'm ready for this shit. It's him. I'm like, no, that's not true. When you gave me the meeting, the notice for the 48-hour meeting, or the meeting for the 48-hour notice, you told me I need to not have my nails, and then such and such, the front of the house said I can wear gloves, and that's how it ended. Then he's like, that's not true, blah, blah, blah. And he's like making shit up. And then he just looks at the GM like, help me, help me. And the GM knows me. He knows I'm not, blah, blah, blah. And he's looking at this book that no one's opened in 50 years. And the book says, oh, you can't have painted nails because it's a health code violation. They've never enforced this rule before me. But God knows this guy probably stayed up all night, the loser, looking for something to ding me on. So he's going to go for the nails because he can't win with the attendance. He's got to go for the nails. So I'm like, look, like, this is not what you told me. I would never be insubordinate because he's trying to phrase it like I'm insubordinate again, like I went against his direct orders. I'm like, you never told me that to way, told it to me that way. If you had told it to me that I needed to get rid of it before my next shift, I would have done it because it's a direct order. I don't disobey direct orders. The easiest thing in the world. And he's like, blah 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 blah. He starts getting mad, and then the GM's like, look, for the sake of it, like, can we just put this over with? He's like, Grant, you need to get rid of the nails. I'm just saying it now so we can move on. So you need to go find some remover and remove them. So I'm like, okay, whatever. So they basically gave me the day off to go look for the remover. So the big thing is when this girl did an amazing job on him. Her name's Davina. I think her nail service is in Vegas now, unless she's still at the park. But it's Davina Does Nails or something like that. But she did this amazing service, like perfectly done gel nails, whole like pedicure kind of thing, $30, like friend price or whatever, and looked amazing. But she used gel, so gel is really hard to get off, and you need something called acetone in the remover. So with the acetone, it's very hard to get in a national park because it's like a chemical that's like environmentally unfriendly, and everything's pretty environmentally friendly there. So I wandered around the whole day. I made it like a fun day. I grabbed up two of my friends. We just walked everywhere. I didn't drive. Walked all the stores looking around. They don't have any acetone there. I can't do anything about my nails. So it's like, what am I going to do? So I go back to work that day at the very end of the day. And I'm like, hey, there's nothing I can get rid of my nails with. And they're like, huh? They're like, well, you should go talk to HR. And so I had already made buddies with HR because on my day off, I went there and I told them everything about the situation, the meeting, and everything. So I went to go talk to her again. And when I talked to her that day, she was like, well, by the way, I was meaning to tell you the way you handled yourself and the way you took records and notes and everything, you should really think about becoming a union rep because I hear you're going to move to Wawona. We don't have any union reps in Wawona, so we could really use someone like you up there to be the union rep. So I was basically becoming a part of the union. And my question was like, can I still be on my probationary like 90 days and be a shop steward? It's like, yeah, there's no rule about that. It's like the youngest shop steward out would have been it was super cool. So that was like the winning caveat was I got that out of it at least that they bumped me up for a union job. So which comes with like extra housing or better housing, better pay. You can like go off and do meetings during your work day and just get paid for that instead of working. I was like, damn. So the one thing was I went to the HR and told her about the nails thing. She's like, this is just so stupid. And she's like, look, she's like, you're going to be moving in a week. Do you really want to work there for a week? Or like it was like 2 weeks. You really want to work there for 2 more weeks, or do you want to just take the time off and get that time to move? And I was like, I'd rather just not work there. She's like, well, I'll talk to the GM and I'll tell him that, and we'll see what we can do. So I go into the GM's office, and immediately I'm like telling him, and the first thing he says when I walk in is, "You're going to be a porter." I'm like, "What's a porter? I've only ever played Death Stranding. I don't know what a porter actually is. Am I going to be fighting BTs and all that crap and beating up mules?" And he's like, a porter, basically, you take the trash can around, you fill it up, and you put it away. And then you just bust the tables. And I was like, okay, whatever. I can do a new job for a week. It sounds pretty fun. So he's like, you're going to work today. These guys love telling you your new job and making you work that day. It's their favorite thing to do. So he's like, you're working today at 6, go in at 6. So that shift was like 6 to 10. Normally it's 4 to 10 or 4 to 12 or something. But I get in there and like, I got a new uniform. I got a snazzy new jacket that I still have, really good material. And these people, these guys, Aramark, if you look at the inside of the jacket, you can see the old patch from the old company that used to own the park. And they just ironed a patch over all the jackets. They didn't get new jackets because they're so cheap. They just ironed a new patch over it. So you can see the old corporation called Delaware North Corporation that used to own the park and own the jobs. And they just put their little patch over it. It's so metaphoric. It's so funny. But anyways, I got a snazzy new uniform, some khakis. I just wore my work shoes, a polo shirt that was like athletic material. And all you would do in that job is just sit around 3 times a shift, maybe even 2 every 8 hours. You'd walk around, grab this big bucket, dump the trash cans in with gloves. It wasn't that gross. Throw it away, and then walk back and just sit around all day and talk to each other. And like you'd walk through the kitchen and make sure people saw you. My really cool coworker Otis was telling me like, oh, you got to make. He's like 85 years old. He's like, you got to do walkthroughs. You got to make sure people see you so they know you're around. You're not just sitting somewhere. And then I just go walk and take a break for 30 minutes. So there's like 10 minutes of work for an 8-hour shift. It's so easy, and it's literally emblematic of what a minimum wage job should have been because it's minimum wage. You just you're there to help. You take out the trash. It's a service, but you're not doing much. You're not doing what I was doing for the same amount of pay, which is almost cutting my fingers, bumping my head, being under the hot oven, burning my hands, getting shit dropped on my feet all the time. It's like, dude, this is so much easier. So I no longer work for the chef. So I would just call him by his name really upfront because calling someone chef is like a sign of respect. So to just say his first name now probably fucking hurt him because that's all he has is his chef name. So it's like, oh, what's up? And I would just say his name, and it's like, you're not my you're not my boss anymore. I don't have to like I can just be nice, but I don't have to do what you say anymore. So I would just fuck around, go talk to my friends in the kitchen, cause trouble, be in the way all the time for the bosses, and they all hate me now. And what I learned later was is the chef had just gone and told all of his inner circle the story from his side of view, his point of view, where I just went off on a rebel blast off and scratched myself off and just said whatever and left and like didn't show up that day. And they all think I'm just some dickhead and they hate me now, all the chefs who are my friends. And one of them even came to confront me at like my place where I live in the kitchen. And he was like, getting mad at me. And I was talking to him and I said, like, speaking frankly off the record, like, what do you think about the situation I'm in? Because I want to see what he thought had happened. And he's like, look, man, I just got transferred to a new restaurant, but if you were my employee and I was a chef, I would have fired you right fucking there. Like, no one does that. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, what do you think happened? And this was a big conversation because he had been brainwashed or something, but he's like, you don't just schedule yourself off. You don't just scratch yourself off. If I schedule you to work, you got to work because I got people that are there that want to work. And if you don't, I don't need you. And he's talking like I'm a prisoner smashing stones. This is some guy who's barely been management for like a couple months, and he's already talking like he's one of them, where he just doesn't value people. He's like, if you don't want to work, and other people do, I just fire you and get someone that does. I'm like, Jesus Christ. So I'm like, what do you think happened? What is it you think you see? Who is it you think you're talking to? No, but he's like, well, because I'm like, from what happened, what I'm telling you, man, honestly, is I talked to him directly. I got verbal permission. He signed off on it, and then I did it. And now I'm coming back, and everybody's jumping down my throat. And he can't comprehend that. He thinks I'm making it up. He's like, look, you've been talking to the wrong people at your work because we don't know those people are bad influences. He's talking about my lead, my senior cook who's there to advise us. They hate union people. The managers hate union people. So she's a union person. Like, you've been talking to the wrong people. They're giving you bad advice. They're bad influences. And I'm like, what are you talking about, man? And then I was like, well, whatever. I told him that and, blew him off. And then later he comes back and he's hanging out in the kitchen. And we leave the kitchen. We're out on the balcony in front of the kitchen. We're talking. And he's like, look, man, I didn't want to see this happen to you because you're a really good worker. You absorbed everything. You listened. You're friendly. You were a really good guy, like blah, 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 all that crap. And he's like, I don't want to see this happen to you. And I hit him with the zinger, and he's probably too drunk to even get it. He wasn't super drunk, but I was like, if you're right, maybe that kind of person doesn't thrive here because I've done nothing but that. And now I'm being persecuted for it. So maybe that kind of worker that you idolize, that you want, they don't thrive here. They don't do well. He's like, what do you mean by that? I'm like, well, clearly I'm that kind of person and I've never strayed from that and I'm being persecuted. Maybe this isn't kind of the place that deserves those kind of people. It's basically how I put it to him. And that's how I still feel, is it's just that place does not, that kind of worker doesn't thrive there. It's just like this hellscape. So anyways, the porter job was really fun. The chefs didn't like me anymore. I could not give a fuck. And I was just walking around, being happy, just sitting, smoking in the break, talking to people, talking to my coworker Otis, which was super fun. He said he didn't really talk to people, but he would always talk to me because I figured out he was really into planes. So one day I was like, oh, you like planes? And he just went off on this like hour-long story about how he saw Obama get off Air Force One, like a mile, an hour away from the park. He landed somewhere and he loves Air Force One. And he told me how this and that. And he had a lot of really cool stories. So I walked around with my snazzy uniform, took lots of breaks, did my job, but did it at my own pace and just had a ton of fun with that job. And the ironic thing, I got more free food from that job than I did as a cook. I would just pick food. They would actually tell the porters, hey man, the food's coming off. Do you guys want anything? They never told the cooks that. Nobody told the cooks that. But the front of house people would always tell the porters. We'd go grab up some food. I'd make myself my lunch for free. I never got that as a cook. And I actually had time to eat too. So pretty crazy. So just wrapping up because I know Dead Space is soon. That was like one of my last weeks in the Valley. So we would just kind of like, as a conclusion, I'd meet with a lot of friends. At that point, we would go drinking or just go hang out. We would like go on walks, talk to each other. One big thing we'd like to do was go up to like a hiking trail and hang out and do stuff. Lots of good hiking I did, like hiking along lakes, getting lost, going on way too long of hikes, like ripping up my legs from like just insanely long things. We'd go do beach volleyball. I never played beach volleyball. I've done it before, but I didn't do it there because I didn't really know everybody there. And my one friend Colin, that was like super cool, like established himself at his workplace, like using his hustling technique. And just a quick tangent, like he basically established himself as the boss without being the boss because he's so like savvy to that stuff. And the way he did it was nicknames. So he started calling himself the Colonel, And when they talk to each other on the radio, he'd give everybody ranks. So the colonel, the captain, this and that. And he started calling his supervisor the major, which is under a colonel. So everybody starts subconsciously calling him colonel, and now they're listening to what he's saying. They're not telling him what to do anymore. And it actually worked. So this guy is like no longer doing anything. He just sits around and plays Smash Brothers on the Switch, like his whole shift, and drives the truck around. He goes and takes hour-long breaks, this and that, and it's just like so funny. I'm like, this is so perfect. So he'd tell me all these amazing work stories. I know he was a psychological mastermind. I honestly really looked up to him because he did it for good. It was just for fun or like to make himself. It's like some Tom Sawyer shit. So always had a lot of good stories from him. But that was so he would give us rides in his work truck. We'd come hang out with him. He'd pick us up in his truck and drive us down to the beach, even though it was like a 5 minute walk. Stuff like that was really fun. And yeah, that was pretty much the conclusion. Like after that, everybody knew I was moving and they were real sad. They're like, we don't want to see you go. Because I was one of the oldest people there, like, you know, age wise and my time there compared to all of them. I had been there since March and most of them got there in early May, late April. So they all told me they were going to miss me and they asked me about my new job. And as far as I knew, it was going to be, I'm going to go be a tour guide and I'm going to go up there and, be on the horses. So I said goodbye to them and I shipped off, I think, very late May. I got up to the new place, and next time I want to do the GreezeyCast, I'll talk about the new place. But that's pretty much it for that first arc. There's a lot of little things, but it's a lot of fun. This is about 2 hours and 47 minutes, and I talked the whole time. But this was pretty fun. And if you have questions, you can type them. I know people came and went, but I'm gonna upload this to YouTube. Hopefully tonight. It's just audio, but let's see. As a janitor at a place like that, I got 3 free meals a shift plus free soda. Yeah, they love the janitors. For us, it was more like the cooks are just slaves and they have no time and they're constantly under the thumb of the chefs. They have no time to break out. And you really get as much freedom as you give yourself, and then you get snapped on the wrist for it. But it was too much. Yeah, that's on par with some kitchen nightmare type management. Yeah, dude. Real happy you came out on top and had a little cakewalk on your porta job. Yeah, the porta job was so perfect because it's like I'm still there, and all the people that hate me now have to see me, and I get to be happier than them, and I'm not doing some drudgy job that sucks. And I'm getting paid, and it's like I just get to mess around and just like have fun, and nobody really checked me because it's like, well, I'm pretty much protected. I get to leave in a week to my new job, and like they need me, so screw off. So part two is going to be happening next time, and that's going to be talking about the stables, which I have a lot to talk about there. But this was a very different chapter coming up, but this was part one. So hope you guys liked it. I'm going to take a break. I'm going to go to the bathroom, and then we're going to get on Dead Space ASAP because I really want to play Dead Space. So I'm excited, and it's getting dark. So thanks for listening, guys. This will be going on YouTube. I'm going to end the stream just so it's easy for me to upload to YouTube, and I'll be right back.